And so good evening, everyone. We're having a special session tonight, and that special session is to focus on the Kabbalah, and Nick Lawrence, who has been one of our regular members right along, has agreed to give us a lecture and try to bring us up to speed on the Kabbalah. So without further ado, Nick Lawrence, it's your floor.
All right, let me just get my screen set up here before we start. It says host has disabled attendee screen sharing.
Okay, wait a minute. I have to co-host you. That's right.
All
For
right.
the third time in the last half hour.
Okay, let's try this
All
again.
right, so Nick, you have the con now, so go ahead.
All right, here we go. All right. Okay, everybody can see that all right? Yep.
Yes.
All right, excellent. So as this clearly says, I'm Nicholas Lawrence. It's a pleasure to be with you all, and we're going to talk about the Kabbalah or the Kabbalah. There are several different traditions of the Kabbalah. That's why on each of these slides, typically I have a Q, a C, and a K. The Q is the Hermetic Kabbalah, the C is the Christian Kabbalah, and the K is the Jewish Kabbalah. As for the teaching, they're not vastly different, but the people studying the tradition is what really makes up the difference in the letter. With the Hermetic Kabbalah, it's a slightly more pagan system. But so let's get started. What does Kabbalah mean? Let's see here. I'm going to try to move this to where. Okay, cool. So Kabbalah loosely means received or oral traditions. For many years, the Kabbalah was not written down but passed from teacher to student. As the years went on, adherents to the teachings became concerned that the tradition wouldn't be continued, so they began to write down the teachings. The early Kabbalists relied heavily on the Bible. The text in the Bible paired with the knowledge of the Kabbalah makes for a deeper and altogether different interpretation of the text of the Bible. The early teaching began under the title of Merkaba, which means chariot mysticism, which centered around a mystical interpretation of the vision of Ezekiel. The intention was to construct a chariot to ascend through the heavenly spheres and pass into the Hekalot, which means palace. We can see the similarities through various traditions of constructing something of a container, a vehicle, or a vessel used to go into the divine realms. In alchemy, this would be the vase in which the work takes place. It is thought that around the time of the burning of the Library of Alexandria, which were fertile grounds for many different traditions to meet and cross-pollinate, that the Jewish Kabbalah, with a K, met and was combined with the Hermetic tradition. So, let me see. The view of the panelists is just blocking my text here. Let me move this around. Okay. So from this point forward, we now have the tradition practiced by people in the Western mystery tradition and known as the Hermetic Kabbalah. In addition to this idea, to the idea of this being the birth of a new branch of Kabbalah, it is also thought that out of this same situation, the tarot had its birth as a pictorial instruction and the mysteries then being labeled as a heresy. So that's not been completely authenticated, but in certain traditions, people speculate that that was actually the birth of the tarot around the year 1200 AD, although there aren't written records. All right. So, and I'm just going to go through a couple of slides and we'll stop, and you guys, at any point, if you have a question or anything that you want to say, please just jump right in. But if not, then I'll just stop at some point after a few slides and we can have some discussion. Okay, so let me make sure that this is the, yeah. Okay, so the Tree of Life, the central glyph of the Kabbalah. Several traditions have their own iteration of a mystical tree. We have reference to the tree of life and of good and evil in Genesis, the world tree or Yggdrasil in Norse mythology, and the philosophical tree in alchemy. Across the different traditions, there are several constructions of the tree, some with completely different placements of the paths between the spheres, and some with an 11th sphere called Doth or Da'at, Hebrew for knowledge and similar to Gnosis. On the tree, there are usually 10 different spheres called Sephiroth, plural, or Sephira, singular. In between each of the Sephirot are 22 different paths connecting some of the spheres with one another, but not always. Here is where the Hebrew alphabet is used. Each of the paths has a different Hebrew letter assigned to it. Unlike the English alphabet, each character of the Hebrew alphabet has an image or pictograph associated with it as well as a numerical value. For instance, the Hebrew letter Aleph associated with the Fool card connecting the top sphere of Kether and the second right sphere of Hakma, the number value 1, and the first letter of the alphabet has an ox as its pictograph. This can be very helpful for arriving at a different interpretation of the cards of the tarot, as the imagery of an ox is used several times over the sequence of the cards. And that's something that I kind of touch on a little bit later, but not in depth. I chose to not go into every single card of the tarot just because that would be more than we're set up to do right now. So perhaps at a later time we can do that. So the tree continued. On the tree, there are 4 distinct levels. These are called the Kabbalistic Worlds. Each of the worlds is associated with a different aspect of creation or emanation, down to the bottom being the manifest and material worlds. The 4 worlds are associated with the 4 elements, starting with the highest world, the archetypal world of Atziluth. We have the element of fire. Associated with the element of fire is the suit of wands in the tarot. So I think I touch on this a little bit in some following slides, but I'll just go ahead and say, there are 2 different constructions of the tree, one where you stack 4 trees on top of each other. So you have in total 40 spheres. Or you can look at the tree, which is comprised of 10 spheres, as 3 groups of 3 spheres working together, and then a final single sphere at the bottom, and use each of those as the worlds. Now, I talk about this a little bit later, but I think that's the most useful construction of the tree, just because it's not as complicated. It's not looking at 40 different circles, but only 10. So that's just something to keep in mind. But each of these worlds is associated with a different element and has a different name. So we'll go into that a bit. I kind of on the tail end of the comment about fire and the suit of wands, I have this passage from the Gospel of Thomas, which is a Gnostic text from the Nag Hammadi. So in Logion 82, Jesus says, "He who is near to me is near to the fire, and he who is far from me is far from the kingdom." This is interesting for 2 reasons. One, because the archetypal world of the highest point on the tree is associated with fire, but also for the use of the word kingdom, which is the meaning of the bottom sphere of the tree named Malkut. So Kabbalistically, that's a very interesting statement. Without going further into detail, you can see how a basic understanding of the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life can shed a light on biblical allegories and parables. The other worlds are called Braya, the creative world, Yetzirah, the formative world, and Asiya, the manifest world. These are associated in order with the elements of first fire, which is Atziluth mentioned above, and then water, air, and earth, all going in order. So anytime in the tarot, whether it be with just looking at the suits or with the 4 worlds here, is a really simple trick just to remember that these are always fire, water, air, and earth in that order. There is what people in esoteric circles call the Tetragrammaton, which is the 4-letter name of God I'm not going to say Tetragrammaton over and over, but Kabbalists believe that it's kind of taboo to say Yahweh. So I have said it already, so I guess the cat's out of the bag. But so in the construction of that name, you have 4 letters: the Hebrew letter Yod, the Hebrew letter He, the Hebrew letter Vav, and then the Hebrew letter He again. So Yod is fire, He is water, Vav is air, He repeated is then earth. So that's just a little trick to remember that in tarot or in Kabbalah, that's pretty much the order that the elements always go in, descending from highest to lowest. And I don't know that I touch on this in the slides, but you know, your comment about the 5th tarot and the inclusion of spirit, I would say that spirit is already included in the tarot as it is, as the aces. Because once you've taken the major arcana from the tarot and put that in between each of the spheres on the pathways, and then you remove the 16, are they called pip cards? The kings, queens, knights, and pages. Anyways, we'll call them pip cards. Once you remove those, you're left with just 36 cards. Aces are removed from that as well. But if you place the cards ace, 2, 3, 4 onto 10 onto the tree, you're able to put the aces in Kether, the 2s in Hakma, the 3s in Bina, on down the whole tree. And the aces are considered to be the spirit of the elements in the suit. So just a bit of an aside there.
Well, I'm not convinced about the how it all structures in the fifth suit yet.
Okay.
So I don't know enough about it yet. I have to actually get their book, because the book that comes with the deck isn't up to standard, up to my standard anyway. So I want to see what they say in that, and then we may have to do a little development on our own.
Yeah.
Well, in the 5th element, I've heard indications that it is a between or an around, except that it's corporeal, which would be antithesis of between or around. So the jury's out on that for me too, Skip.
Well, I mean, I think it also relates to the self, and how that goes together, I haven't gotten my mind around yet. So I'm going to order the book from the 5th Tarot people and see what they say about it, and then we may be having consultation about it in the future. Okay, but what I do think about their deck, and this is for Patricia, since she's here now, and was the one that told me about the 5th Tarot. So Patricia, we did have a discussion about it before we went on to YouTube. Basically, I think it's a brilliant innovation what the people who did the 5th Tarot have done. I simply haven't completely understood it yet, is my point. And nobody else has seen the deck, so yet.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions? Is this stuff making any sense at all? Is this landing for you guys?
So far, so good.
Okay.
Could you respond to then the repeat of, I can't remember which one, that becomes Malkuth? I mean, you have 3 associations, and then when you repeat it on the 4th, it becomes the other. I think Malkuth.
I was talking about the letter He.
Yes.
The Hebrew letter He is just repeated 2 times. So in the Hebrew alphabet, there isn't a letter for earth. It's included in the alphabet itself is fire, air, and water. So I guess it's thought that these 4 come together to make matter, to make earth. So
is there concept of a circle where you start to scribe the circle with a compass and you go through 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then like the compass led Ouroboros bites its tail. When the circle completes, it's back at hay again, and there is a complete circle equals Earth. Is there that attribution?
I honestly couldn't say. I don't know.
Well, certainly if you look at the Rider-Waite Tarot, for example, and you look at the Wheel of Life, the Wheel of Fortune, it says Torah around the sides, so it's a direct, and it does it. I think the Hebrew letters on that Wheel of Fortune and many others is Yod He Vav He.
Yeah,
I agree.
precisely.
And then
Yeah.
it completes the circle, at which point it becomes Earth as the inclusiveness of all of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but the point, Jordan, is that works for all creatures, large and small, right? But the fifth element, the human element, is the reality of the inner world, the unseen world.
Right. So I think that then the manifest destiny, so to speak, of when that hay repeats and becomes Earth, there's then, in a sense, an explosion or an emanation that then becomes the other of the self that is within and all
Or
around
maybe
that.
maybe it's the center of the circle.
Both. I think it's both, actually, because it's within and about.
Yeah.
Okay, so if nobody has any questions,
I wanted to just
go ahead.
According to Science of Mind, the God's body is everything.
Right.
So, I mean, that's really broad, but the body is everything, material and immaterial, and sentient, and that which is considered non-sentient.
yeah, I mean, I think there's a really interesting parallel with the Tree of Life and that idea of God's body. And as I mentioned last week, that is a Kabbalistic concept, more or less, in the body of what's called Adam Kadmon.
Well, let me just say it's explicitly, because let me share my, I'll just put it on here. Let me get rid of my cloaking for a minute. Okay, so this week I got Kabbalah for Beginners, and it's by Rabbi Brian Yosef Schachter Brooks. And on the back cover, it says, God is existence. The Kabbalistic method is that God is not a being, not even the most supreme being, but is rather being itself. Okay, so that's in keeping with what you're saying.
I think it's also interesting just to note that in what Jung writes about water being the preferred symbol for the unconscious, wind as being spiritus and pneuma and all of these different things, and primordial fire and things like that, you never hear like an archetypal language associated with anything to do with earth, except for maybe like Mother Nature and stuff like that. So it kind of seems like these three more volatile elements are considered the more spiritual elements. So if nobody has any other comments or anything, I will.
We'll save this for the discussion of the fifth suit. But go ahead.
Cool. All right. So this is an image of the Tree of Life with its 10 spheres and 22 paths. Often writers on the topic will reference the tree with its mysterious 32 paths, while there are only 22 paths, but the 22 plus the 10 spheres equals the 32. This is called a Kabbalistic blind, and it is one of many. With certain authors who write on the Kabbalah and or Tarot, they intentionally deceive their readers. On the one hand, they believe that if the student is learned, they will eventually call their bluff. And on the other hand, some just like to deceive people. And towards the end, I have a slide on all of the authors which I would recommend and which I feel are to be trusted. As much as Crowley was kind of kind of an occult genius. He was known for deliberately deceiving people and putting out information that would lead people astray. So I would recommend staying away from some of his teachings. And if you know his tarot, you know that he mixed up some of the cards, and you know, there's all sorts of speculation about why he did that. But nonetheless, it's a significant change, and it kind of hurts some symbolism. So going forward.
Okay, Nick, when you say that, you're mainly talking about the Strength and Justice cards?
The Strength and Justice cards, I think he also changed. I don't think he may not have actually changed the card, but he changed the Hebrew letters associated with the Emperor and with the star. Normally the Emperor is the Hebrew letter He. He made it the Hebrew letter Zadi, and the star he changed to the Hebrew letter He, which is a significant change. And you know, I can't really say much more about what it might represent, but you know, he claimed to have something very similar to what Jung had in Philemon as this inner guide that he called Iowas. And apparently Iowas dictated the book of law to him, and also instructed him to make all these changes in his tarot and his systems of the Kabbalah. And, you know, the guy just has a lot of slippery stuff associated with him.
Well,
so.
and we can save it for the discussion, but I think that what's interesting about his switch of those two Hebraic letters specifically is that the Emperor was always that second He, that establishment of the place. And then he put that place at the star, which would be then in a sense an allusion to the fifth element. So we can save that for discussion, but I see some... I
can see how it works in that regard, but I mean, it also just completely throws off the order of the Hebrew alphabet. I mean, you know, these are in the order of the Hebrew alphabet, and
that's a tradition. That's a tradition with masters too, as an initiation procedure. I mean, just even like the wolf story. You know, which one do I feed? Well, the third option, you feed them both. You don't get a choice. You have to make your own. So there's kind of a need to jump out of the system to understand the system. So there's a lesson on perspective, but at the same time, that's a little further off the point than where we are right now. So I'll push that to discussion.
Yeah, and I mean, there's that. I think it may even be Crowley that said, you know, Kabbalah is a system that evolves with time, and it evolves to meet the spiritual needs of the people who turn to it, right. Which I quite like that idea. So, you know, on the other hand, I don't mind somebody taking liberties with stuff like this. You know, it's not totally sacred and totally fixed and stuff like that. So
if they take liberties with it, if they're right, it will survive. If they're not right, it will disappear.
Yeah.
And I'd say if it doesn't evolve, it's not useful. I mean, the old quote of paint dries, language never. So it is in process alongside us.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. And like I said, I quite like that idea. I mean, you know, that's obviously allows for a fluidity within the tradition that is needed.
We're currently entering a fifth stage of consciousness, and that fifth stage is the top of the five-pointed star, which is the human being.
I would like to contribute something.
Okay, go ahead,
please,
Samantha.
Okay, so the first thing is that it reminds me of how Iceland is green and Greenland is icy, and they flipped it. And then the other thing is that I have read that, let me try to recreate this. It's really rich. There's many layers, but basically, what was it? Something about time. The fact that we have evidence of something that we call the Big Bang, right? Mm-hmm. Where there was no matter, as far as we know, and then suddenly there was matter. Mm-hmm. So the fact that, so that's where a lot of people get this idea that there was an origin, evidence of God, and that also has something to do with timing, how once there was matter, it started in one place and moved to another, which indicates choice. And I forget, gosh, there was some type of connection with Kabbalah, which, and what we just read, and I kind of flew out my head, but I don't remember what it was.
That's okay. Please come back to it if it comes back to you.
If I may too, I mean, Samantha too, the Greenland Iceland thing was a military strategy because Iceland was so beautiful and fecund that they named it Iceland.
Mm-hmm.
And they named Greenland so everyone would go attack them and die. So in a sense, it was a vetting procedure for the military so that they could just be left alone. So again, the tricks are in play. And then Skip, I'd have to say the 5-pointed star, and then I personally use the 7-pointed star, which is the alchemical star, as the symbol of self. So and I like the back and forth with both of them, honestly. So the pinnacle of either just has 5 or 7 components.
Okay, well, as I was discussing it with Susie this afternoon, Stein has in Map of the Soul, Jung's Map of the Soul, an introduction. He has discussed 7 stages of consciousness. Okay,
right,
and so the 20th century got us to the 4th stage, which was a nihilistic stage. Okay, God is dead, right? But what Dr. Jung did was he came back in the next generation and found the living God where he lives and how he goes about doing the work of the Godhead. And so if you understand what I just said, you'll get it. If you don't, then you need to do some study. And I'm not talking about you, Jordan. I know you know this, but so the 7-pointed star.
Don't worry, I didn't take it that way.
So the 7-pointed star makes sense. Okay, the 5-pointed star is the quintessence, right? Which is the human. The 6th stage is the collective unconscious. So that's why I'm not convinced that we'll stop at 5 suits. There might be 6 or 7. And Jung talked about the Kabbalah representing the 7th stage, which he didn't think that Westerners were capable of experiencing, which was the direct energy into the top chakra.
Well, I will say, Skip, too, every time, I work with the 7-pointed star of the alchemist, but I'm also an artist, architect, etc., tarot reader and all that. So it aligns with what I see in the verbs and actions of my process. But when I look at it, it always kind of, as a fraction, reduces back to the 5 or a 6. The 7 there's extra. So in a sense, it's in alignment with my process personally, with all the things I see outside of the standard process. But I will say, generally, I do always fall back into reduce the fraction to 5 and then 6 on the outside of the collective unconscious.
I remember what I was going to say now.
Go ahead.
It had to do with Kabbalah. So Nick, you were talking about the evolutionary nature of Kabbalah, that it's meant to meet the needs of those who practice it or who,
right. Yeah.
And so what I was thinking about change, right? The fact that it changes is a sign of life. Like change itself is a sign of life, the way that we see, a flower that grows, it changes, right? And then a plastic flower doesn't change. So I was thinking that is very fitting for the tree of life, right? That it can change, as well as change indicating consciousness as well. Change indicating a choice. Change over time indicates, some would argue, choice, conscious choice. And if God is consciousness, then that makes sense. Anyway, just a little bit of God, no big.
Well, that makes complete sense. Yeah, that makes complete sense. Because if we start at step 1, Lilith uttered the ineffable, birthed consciousness, tricked God into giving her wings so she could fly away, snuck back in as a serpent, and then convinced Eve to do the same thing. And Eve is, given all the credit for birth of consciousness, and Lilith is demonized. But at the same time, that's step 1, step 2, and then here we are at step 4 and 5.
All right. So Nancy says, could we see the panel instead of Nick's slide? Well, I think we need to give Nick a chance to go through the rest of his presentation, and we'll try to.
I agree.
We'll try to.
No one wants to see my mug.
We'll try to button our lips for the moment. Let Nick finish, and then
I'll fire
have
through
the panel.
I'll fire through some more slides here, but when we do go into discussion, if I just click show grid video, will that then give the viewers on YouTube a chance for everybody?
You can end the share. You can stop the screen share, and then we'll all come back, and then you can reshare it again.
Okay. All right. So I'm just going to keep marching on here.
All right.
All right. So the Sephirot, or the spheres. With each sphere, as it progresses down the tree from the top to the bottom, they become easier to cognize or understand. The worlds can be viewed 2 ways, each conveying the same concept through a different construction of the tree. One is the 10 Sephirot being separated into 3 pairs of 3, a triad, with the final and lowest world being a single sphere, that of Malkut, the other by the tree being stacked on top of itself 4 times to achieve the 4 worlds. So this is what I was talking about earlier. For our purpose, I believe the model of the single tree with the worlds as 3 sets of 3 and the 4th and final world as a standalone sphere at the bottom, which is Earth, to be the most useful. All right. So I just put this kind of as my own personal take on this because this was my personal experience, and I would guess that this is probably the experience of several other people. So something to ask yourself before you really get into this kind of thing is, I believe it is important now, before we get into specific aspects of the tree, to keep in mind that this does deal primarily with religious experience and with God, whatever that may be for you. Something I think every Kabbalist will come up against sooner or later in their quest for understanding is asking themselves, what am I really in service to, or to what end am I truly aiming? I think this is important because you want to know at the outset what your intentions are when wading into the waters of any mystical tradition. It is not about any kind of power, magical manipulation of your environment, personal gratification, etc. At the end of the day, it should be a guiding light to better understand the world around you and have your own experience of God, whatever that is for you, instead of accepting something merely on the words and experiences of another. It is not my intention to ruffle anyone's feathers by saying this, only to prime you for what will inevitably have to be asked of oneself if you were to make use of this tradition in later work. All right, so now to the tree. And let's see here. All right. So Kether, the crown, is the top sphere, the white one. So this is the white sphere at the uppermost point on the tree. As stated previously, the higher on the tree the sphere in discussion is, the more difficulty one has with putting the experience of the sphere into words. What can we really know of God's world anyways? Probably the best conveyance of the sphere I can give is to have you imagine 99% spirit and 1% matter. Here things are in unity and in the realm of almost entirely spirit. The best description I can give is to make use of the creative process. Imagine you wake up one morning and just feel a sense of inspiration. Maybe you don't even have the idea, but you were inspired. Interestingly, the etymology of inspired comes from the Latin inspirare, meaning into breath. As we know well from other languages, the concept of spirit and breath go hand in hand.
Nice.
While it is not easy to put into words, an image of what is meant by Kether is hopefully beginning to take shape in your mind. In part, the difficulty arises from it not standing, as of yet, in opposition to any other thing. In it, all opposites are contained, but have not yet manifested. A most useful meditative tool to further develop your understanding of this concept is the number 0. Making use of other traditions to understand the framework that is the tree of life can really help us. For this, I will make use of a passage from the Tao Te Ching, passage 14. Look for it, it cannot be seen. It is called the distant. Listen for it, it cannot be heard. It is called the rare. Reach for it, it cannot be gotten. It is called the subtle. These three ultimately cannot be fathomed. Therefore, they join to become one. Its top is not bright. Its bottom is not dark. Existing continuously, it cannot be named, and it returns to no thingness. Thus, it is called the formless form, the image of no thing. This is called the most obscure. Go to meet it, you cannot see its face. Follow it, you cannot see its back. By holding to the ancient Tao, you can manage present existence and know the primordial beginning. This is called the very beginning thread of the Tao.
Cool.
And while we're on the topic of the Tao Te Ching, I mean, if with a basic understanding of the Kabbalah, reading that entire book of poems and pieces of writing, it, you know, cast a very, very interesting light on what Lao Tzu has to say. All right.
Well, it does. Lao Tzu, and then contrasted with Morihei Ueshiba. I mean, the art of war and the art of peace. Actually, I never mind. Pardon, I'm thinking Sun Tzu. So I'll back off.
Easy to confuse those two.
I'm noticing the connection between that verse in the Gospel of Thomas, which is, I'm paraphrasing, folks. So someone who knows it specifically, feel free to jump in. But it's split a rock and I am there. Split the wood and I am there. Yeah, that it's the formlessness, the indefinable.
Well,
And
you're also
I find that very comforting that you can have this tradition beginning in one area and then a tradition in another area, and then you come back to these universal themes. That's so far what I'm getting from your lesson.
Yeah, I mean, they're all talking about the same thing.
Well, you know, and split the rock and I am there, split the wood and I am there, water flows and I will flow through the rock. I mean, there's basically nature's fingerprint in a sense, that's kind of implied.
Right. I have a reading from another ancient text that will do the same thing. Okay. Now, this is from the Vijaya Bharava, which amounts to the sutras that the Tibetan Buddhist monks always promise to teach you but never will. Okay. So here it is. Elaborate rituals and garish images may be useful in meditation when your mind is whirling with thoughts of sex, money, and power, wandering like an elephant in heat. Go ahead and use these tools. Yet no, beating drums and blaring trumpets cannot summon the one who is already present. I am not a collection of incantations known only to experts. I am not a ladder to be climbed, a sequence of piercing energy centers in your body. I am not to be found at the end of a long road. I am right here. And that is from the Radiant Sutras by Lauren Roach. Okay, but it's the same thing, I think. Okay, carry on.
Well, and Skip, and that takes that across the all. It takes the elitism out of it and gives that to the all of everyone and all beings and all nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I talk about this a bit later on, but you know, this, if you just have a basic understanding of the tree of life, it's the closest thing that I can think of apart from Plato's idea of forms that that approximates Jung's idea of the archetypes. You know, you can really look at almost any philosophical system, mythological system, religious system, and kind of tap into a deeper understanding with this as the backbone of your inquiry. Okay, so Hokmah, wisdom. This is the gray sphere on the top right. Okay, This is the active sphere of the supernal Father. This is the creative impulse. Really contemplate what is meant by impulse, because an impulse is not form, but the idea behind the form. It is the force that precedes form. With the example in previous slides in mind, here we arrive at the point in the creative process, whether it be of a book, a painting, of a child, or of a child for that matter, where the urge to create begins to inform us. Now the inspiration has changed from a spirit filling us to an idea informing us. You hear that new song, or see that new painting, or have that idea that will impact the lives of many. But as all creative people know, there's a marked difference between having an idea and then translating that idea into a form.
Brilliant.
You know, that goes along the lines of the magician and the tarot being inception. The idea, the spark, the first spark, it's formless. It's the ideation. But then the high priestess takes that form and takes that formlessness and gives it form. So in a sense, that goes 1-2, inception, conception, and goes from formless to giving form to the formless.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I talk about that a bit. There are two cards that I chose to do an interpretation for in this presentation. One is the High Priestess and the other is the World card. So more about that in just a bit.
Okay.
Looking forward to it. I'll save a comment.
Okay. So moving across the tree now, one thing to keep in mind as we progress down the tree, it doesn't move in a linear fashion around the outside of the tree, but it zigzags down the tree. So it goes from the white sphere on the top to the gray sphere on the right to the black sphere on the left, across the tree and down to the blue sphere, and that pattern continues until we reach the bottom. So across the top triad to the black sphere, Bina, which means understanding. Also, just one thing that I don't think I said on that last slide, which is worth mentioning, is that Hakma means wisdom, as we learned in our talk with Elisa Markov. That's also synonymous with Sophia, and several of these words, like understanding, if you open to almost any passage in the Bible, it contains these words: wisdom, understanding, knowledge, mercy, strength, stuff like that. And you can assume that those written in their original language, either Greek or Hebrew, would have read Bina or Hakma or Dot instead of understanding or wisdom or knowledge.
Cool. Hey, I want to jump in. Okay, because you guys Jordan mentioned the High Priestess and Nicholas mentioned Sophia. So I think it's a good time to share that this is a great evidence for gender being not about gender, but about energies. So it's the so-called masculine energy of the decision, the idea, the decision or idea, the moving forward, the action outward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then being received by the feminine energy so you could call it Sophia or Lilith, being receptive. It's a receptive energy.
Yeah.
And the combination of those two create the world.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it's not about male, female is my point, just masculine and feminine energies and how both are necessary to create.
Well, Samantha,
Yeah.
that's a really good point in regards to the High Priestess, especially because a lot of people attribute her to be a her. And I'm a creative, so I have what I call a man womb,
Exactly.
and so what it is to me, Eric Newman, if you've read his book, The Place of Creation, that's pretty much one big book about the High Priestess, the place of creation. So it has nothing to do with male, female. It has to do with the creative principle, which Nicholas had then just mentioned. So good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the creativity is the best example, or creation is the best example that I could think to give for the spheres in this top triad. But I'm glad we made the distinction that they're in part male and in part female, but more in the top triad on the tree. it's contained within each of them. So
Yeah.
the typically masculine sphere of Hakma also means wisdom, and people think of that being a feminine receptive component, but I mean, in actuality, this kind of throws a wrench in that, because that means that Hakma, which is the paternal or supernal father, also is Sophia.
Yes. And the word Elohim,
Right.
the original word for God, is plural. So that can indicate masculine and feminine. And I'm glad you mentioned that it's like the yin yang symbol, where the female contains the masculine, the so-called the feminine contains the masculine contains the feminine, because even mother, some consider that to be the origin, that it did not begin with father and then mother, that it was mother and then and father.
Let me offer you that it also applies to the general theory of relativity, E equals mc squared. And so I'll read one more paragraph from the Radiant Sutras. This is from the introduction. The Bharava Tantra, which is what this is set as a conversation between the goddess, who is the creative power of the universe, and the god, who is the consciousness that permeates everywhere. For short, they call each other Devi and Bharava, or Shakti and Shiva. They are lovers and inseparable partners, and one of their favorite places of dwelling is in the human heart. And so my point here is that this also goes all the way back to E equals mc squared, which is you have matter and energy.
And they're together in a way that are inseparable.
Right, precisely. They're constantly switching back and forth between the two. Right.
If anything is missing, it's out of balance.
Yeah, and I actually talk about that a bit. Not in the same terms, but
yeah. Please go ahead, Nick. I think we're interrupting you, so please.
Yeah, I think we
ahead.
hijacked. I'm gonna seatbelt myself back in.
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Of course.
Can you hear me? Thank you, Nick. This is great, but I feel like I'm just a really basic learner. But I just was curious, is that the Kabbalah visual there?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a corresponding way of laying out the cards that matches that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
22 paths. They're 22 paths.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
I have some slides towards the end about that, but just in case you're not around at the very end. So yeah, I mean, you've got 10 spheres here, 10 cards in each of the suits. If you remove the king, queen, knight, and page. So you can do ace, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 on there.
Yeah.
And then that leaves you with the major arcana, and those go in between each of the pathways. And there are 22 of those, 22 major arcana cards. And then you're left with the 16 remaining pip cards. And people use all kinds of different systems for those. I've even seen people use the 16 types of MBTI.
What are MBTI, please?
Do what?
What are MBTI, please?
Oh, the Myers-Briggs type indicator, just the 16 types of that, like INTJ, etc. So, there's 16 types in that. There's 16 cards remaining. I've seen people use that. But essentially, it's a fourfold system that you're left with. You've got kings, queens, knights, pages. So that's more detail than I think I'm prepared to go into right now. But short answer, yes. They all do fit onto the tree.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Nicholas, also to rectify that too, sometimes the royal court or the court guards are indicated as the higher self themselves. So they are that separate fifth suit in a way, all by themselves. And then the numbers don't have to have an attribution to the math of the tree. Yeah,
court cards. That's right. I couldn't think of that. I also I'm just now remembering that there are also, you can put the kings in the supernal father, Hakman.
Right.
You can put the queens in Bina. You can put the knights in Tiffara, and then you can put the pages on Earth in Malkut.
And what's interesting about that is 1, 2, 3, magician, high priestess, empress, emperor. You've created a world in that 1, 2, 3. Repeat, hey, fourth.
Right. All right. So let's go forward here. So Binah is the black sphere across the top triad here, and it means understanding. So now we pass across the top spheres, moving into the first functional triad. Binah is the black sphere on the opposite side of the gray sphere Hakma. They're inseparable parts of each other. Just like Shakti and Shiva, Logos and Eros, spirit and matter, or any other pairs of functional opposites, they are eternally bound together in a reciprocal dance. Whereas before we had the creative urge or impulse, now we have the form that receives the force. This is the sphere of the supernal mother. This is the third sphere of the tree and is the first one to have a planet associated with it. The planet associated with this sphere is Saturn. Typically, limitation and restriction is associated with Saturn, and this plays well with the mother aspect of the card. I mean, of this, I put card, but I meant to put sphere. Remember that the word mother has a strong connection to the word matter. Mater coelestis, prima materia.
Does anyone happen to know how old the Earth is versus how old Saturn is?
I have no clue.
That would be interesting if Saturn was older, you know, because I wonder if it's a literal association. Then again, when astrology started out, they thought, well, Skip said they thought that no, it wasn't Skip, I don't know. They thought that the sun revolved around Earth, but now we know it's
I mean, it's the
yeah.
Ptolemaic model versus the Copernican model. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, but they also thought there were only 7 planets, and obviously we've discovered a couple more. But Saturn, nonetheless, is one of the outer planets, and I think limitation is associated with it because, it's the outer planet that encompasses all of the other rotations within it.
Oh, that's so cool.
So Binah continued. One of the bittersweet truths of being a mother is that by bringing a soul into this world with the newborn is faced with the same restrictions and limitations we all are here. To know the limits and restrictions imposed on us by space and time, or by matter. For better or for worse, we are all faced with limitations while in our earthly vehicle. Here we have the affirmation that the door of life is also the door of death. Whatever passes through this door will also make its exit one day. This isn't meant to be sad or dark, but only to explain the traditional meaning of Saturn in relationship to the sphere of Binah, the supernal mother. How can we ever overcome our boundaries if we don't even know they exist? The greatest contributors in all fields have come to know their limits very well, and because of this, they've moved the mark farther than it had previously been. Going back to the example of the creative process, now the idea that was informing us of its contents has taken form. It no longer lives in your mind as a mere idea, truly indistinguishable from a spirit, but it now has its home in the world of form. It is now that painting, that book, or that song. Okay, so moving down and across the tree to the blue sphere, titled Hesed, which means mercy. Hesed is the benevolent one. He rules his people and his kingdom not by shows of might and strength, but through mercy and compassion. Because of this, his kingdom is ever expanding. The key to the expansive nature of this sphere has to do with Jupiter being the planet assigned to Hesed. Remember that the previous sphere had to do with Saturn, typically restrictive and limiting, and now the symbolism of this sphere and planet are completely opposite to that. In Greek mythology, it was Kronos, Saturn, and interestingly, another name for time in the Greek language, which always ate his children until, with the aid of his mother, Zeus finally escaped this vicious cycle and then became the Greeks' all-father god. Not patriarchal, vengeful, or ruling with an iron hand, he was altogether rather benevolent, even if uninterested for the most part in the daily lives of the Greeks. Benevolence is a virtuous way to live, although always showing mercy and compassion. As I said before, it is expansive. Say a kingdom is under your command, and your interests lie mostly in wanting to expand and improve. That is all fine and well, but eventually word will spread that you have riches that are ready for the taking, and everyone in the kingdom next to you heard you were a pushover as well. What would this matter if a savage force like that of the Vikings was rearing its ugly head? Nowhere before this is the oppositional reciprocity more evident and more needed. As I mentioned previously, all of the spheres operate in some kind of functional triad where two extreme opposites are tempered by a third, the transcendent third that emerges from a confrontation of extreme opposites. In this case, Yasad, the light blue fourth sphere, stands in opposition to the following sphere, Qabalah, which is the red sphere across from it, and is mediated through the sphere below named Tiffara. Okay, so moving to Qabalah, which, as I said, means strength or severity. With the meaning of the previous sphere in mind, it is not difficult to see how these two spheres stand in opposition to each other, as well as condition one another. They are the extremes of one another, one being expansive benevolence and the other being restrictive strength. The planet Mars is assigned to Qabalah, and Mars in classical mythology was the god of war. Qabalah is the one who rules his kingdom by force and might, willing to charge in war to defend his land at any moment. Say you have a garden. Everyone who has garden knows whether flowers or vegetables, you carve out a piece of land and plant the seeds you wish to grow. They begin to grow and everything is going well. But eventually, all the weeds begin to encroach on the garden and take the nutrients and water that the other plants would need. To pull the weeds and remove that which is unwanted is the experience of Qabalah. As much as kindness, compassion, and benevolence are great virtues, so is the strength, prudence, and fortitude needed to know when it is time to weed the garden. Clearly, this is a literal and metaphorical garden. This is a hard lesson to learn, as many people on the spiritual paths in life are not the first to be forceful or assertive, but it is a lesson we must learn in time. This is not to say that we should only ever be forceful or only be benevolent, but that they operate together, and to have a grip on our capacity for both would result in the most balanced mode of operation. So, any comments?
I was thinking before about how we talked about the masculine containing the feminine and the feminine containing the masculine, and how understanding is masculine. But, I went to an all-girls Catholic high school, and we studied, also most of the teachers were women as well, and we studied how Jesus, looking at Jesus as a character, Yahshua ben Joseph, had a lot of feminine qualities. So I just thought, I can't necessarily at this time think of, the only opposite to that I can think of, meaning a feminine character with masculine qualities, is whoever that pharaoh was, the female pharaoh who wore the beard. She would wear...
Is it Nefertiti?
I hope. I think so. Yeah, would wear that. And then the other example is, one moment, it's coming to me. Mary Magdalene is what she's been known as, but what I learned in school, in high school, because they had a kind of a feminist bent. We had nuns and everything. It's low-key feminist. That's the other thing. Anyway, in the secret way, is they taught us that Mary Magdalene, who everyone likes to think of as a prostitute, was actually historically Mary of Magdala. And she's the only woman in the Bible to have a title that is of something, of a city, which means that she was likely a leader, a ruler, maybe not a ruler, but that she had money essentially. So I'm sure there are other stories, but that's the one that that strikes me as a feminine having a masculine, and then that was changed over time. People preferred to think of her as a prostitute, but that was a confusion between, but had something to do with the symbolism. In one of there's many Marys in the Bible, and one of the symbols that was used was like a perfume or a pottery or something. So they thought it was referring to Mary of Magdala or Mary Magdalene, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was Mary.
Yeah, apparently in some of the Gnostic texts as well, Mary Magdalene is referred to as, I might get this word wrong, it's either Kadashista or Kadashta, but Kadash means holy of holies, and with the addition of the Ista or the sta on it, it's just a feminine iteration of the same word. So it's essentially like they were calling her a priestess.
Yeah, they considered her on the same level as the disciples, really, and that she might have also provided funding to, to the group.
That would be an interesting turn of events.
Yeah, patron.
All right. Okay, so moving now to Tiffara. This is the central sphere of the tree, the yellow sphere. It means spirituality, balance, integration, miracles, and compassion. These are the many titles associated with the sphere of Tiffara, although the most common is beauty. This is the seat of the self. It is also referred to as the seat of Solomon because Solomon sat between the two pillars of his temple, Hakin and Boaz, which means strength and mercy, names of the preceding spheres. All of the dying gods, Jesus, Osiris with his son, Horus, and Buddha, are associated with this sphere. This has to do with being the sphere of the sun, which dies each night and regenerates itself each day anew, the savior from the darkness of night. As mentioned previously, the three groups of three spheres, or triads, along the tree operate with two in extreme opposition to each other, then mediated by a third sphere. This, in my humble opinion, is very similar to Jung's concept of the transcendent function, both as a quality of conjoined opposites and the attitude thereof, as well as the end goal of the emergence of the self. In the previous spheres located in the ethical triad, we have two opposing forces, both necessary and equally as virtuous as destructive if unchecked by a third standpoint. Tifereth, the sun, the life giver, is the center of our external universe, but more importantly is the center of our internal universe, where all paths converge. The moon, which we will talk about shortly, only reflects the light of the sun and only orbits Earth. Additionally, it is worth noting that the high priestess in the tarot is seated between those same pillars mentioned earlier in Solomon's temple, those of Hakin and Boaz, indicated by the letter Yod and Beth. More on this shortly. Okay, so Netzach is the green sphere on the bottom right of the tree. And it means victory or perpetuity. The planet associated with Netzach is Venus. This sphere has to do with the experience of the world through the senses. The sensuousness of this sphere plays to the world which comes upon us from the outside, from the senses, and fills us with sensuality and pleasure. The world as experienced by the senses is not the only world. This is the danger. We must learn to see beyond the world which our senses report to us. Loving fine food, fine drink, fine film is all fine. But there is more to life than that which our senses can report. While many know this, many do not. Let's see here. I have a typo. I think I intended to put many do spend a large amount of their lives in the world of externality. This is not to say that there is no value in the world of senses, because of course there is. The experience of beauty, of love, and companionship are among the finest things in life. They are to be enjoyed, but also to be held in right relation. Let us not become hopeless romantics, ever dependent on love from an outside source. This corresponds very closely to Jung's sensation function, which is the opposite perceiving function of intuition, an almost entirely extrasensory function. This sphere is located in the astral triad, loosely meaning the mental world. We will discuss this in further detail when we reach the sphere of the ego. Okay, so across from that is the orange the orange sphere, which is titled Hod, and which means splendor. And as I said earlier, the names of the spheres are often used in tons of biblical passages, and I can think of several in which splendor is used, which is not necessarily an everyday word. All right. Hot is the orange sphere on the bottom left portion of the tree. This is the sphere with the planet Mercury attributed to it. Because of this, the intellect is also attributed to it. Just like Hermes was a psychopomp and could go up into the heavenly regions and or down into the nether regions, so our intellect is capable of traversing the same terrain. If the intellect is a tool well used, then we have precisely that, a tool to further comprehend the world with, and one that won't blind us to the fact that there is more to life than purely hyper-rational pursuits. If we lean on our intellect too strongly, we are apprehended by it. One cannot divorce from the discriminating mind and adjourn into the imaginal world. Jung's theory of active imagination relies heavily on suspending the critical faculty of the ego intellect, and if we can't do this, we cannot go into active imagination at will. To only see matters which you can rationally analyze is a similar problem to that encountered in the previous sphere, only now it is through the intellect that we are blinded to the existence of more than meets the eye. This would correspond very closely to Jung's thinking function. It is speculated that Jung himself was either an INTJ or an INTP, which for either one, the thinking function plays a critical role in its extroverted or introverted mode. As many of you also know, Jung had his famous confrontation with the unconscious. During this time, he says of his experience, "The spirit of the depths took my understanding and all my knowledge and placed them at the service of the inexplicable and the paradoxical." At the same time, there can be no path toward the inexplicable if not through the human intellect. The intellect must be our faithful companion, not the other way around. All right, so on the central pillar, this is the purple sphere titled Yasad, which means foundation. Yasad is the purple sphere near the base of the central pillar on the tree. It is the sphere of the moon, and as such, it only reflects the light of the sun. This is very similar to the notion that the ego reflects the light of the self, since it is only a part of the totality of the psyche. As in the triad preceding this one, the same dynamic is at play. Two extreme opposites mediated by a third point. Excuse me. In this case, it was the senses versus the intellect, now mediated by the ego. The ego is the foundation on which the whole constitution of the individual is built upon. The higher forces discussed up to this point are filtered down to the sphere of Yasad and then transmitted through it. It is the mediator of the senses and the intellect, the one who is to keep both functions in right relation and not let either out of its control. Without a strong ego, one has difficulty doing almost anything in the world. It is the vessel through which we travel the world in. Lacking one, we are in the open sea with nothing to protect ourselves against the waters of life, the chaos, and the Leviathan. But the ego is not the master in the house. It is subordinate to the forces of which he is only an apostle. Going back to the idea of the ego as the foundation of the whole psychic constitution, a Bible passage is relevant to this thought. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who builds his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. This is a parable describing the building of a lighthouse or a house of light. The base of that lighthouse is Yasad, the foundation, and the light therein is Tiffara, beauty, and the sphere just above Yasad on the central pillar of the tree. I wonder if this is what Jung meant in Collected Works 13 when he writes, "The lapis, stone or rock, may therefore be understood as a symbol of the inner Christ, of God in man."
Nicholas, that first, if you go back to the last slide.
Yeah. Here?
Everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who has built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. I mean, two things that come to mind. One, a little secondarily, is, the three pigs, huff and puff and blow your house down. But the old Malay proverb of trees with strong roots laugh at storms. And there's that whole idea of the tree is itself a strong root which will laugh at storms. So when you found yourself in that Yasad, the foundation being within the tree, not under the tree, that makes absolutely all kinds of sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that I can really add anything more to what you've said, but just say that I completely agree.
I can, because I was thinking, wait, you know, within the tree, you know, first my brain went to the literal part and thought, well, a tree's foundation isn't within itself, it's in the roots, it's in the earth. That being said, the trees do have seeds. So yeah, it has the mechanism by which to continue its life within itself.
Right. Yeah, I think the Greeks would have called that the spermatakoi.
Yes, the spermatakoi. And in addition to, if you take a cross section through a tree, the tree root, quote unquote, canopy, the root ball, is typically almost symmetrically identical to the tree canopy. And then there's an allusion to the as above, so below, and the perpetual present of the top of the ground.
You know, the symbol for my city is a tree that is proportionate to the above and the below.
Where do you live?
Oakland, California.
Nice.
Oh, cool. Cool. All right. Anybody else? All right, then we will sally forth. Okay, Malkut. So this is the final sphere, the lowest sphere on the tree, which has 4 different panels, each colored differently. And it means kingdom. Finally, we move to the lowest sphere on the tree. If Kether, the uppermost sphere, is 99% spirit and 1% matter, then Malkut is 99% matter and 1% spirit. It is the sphere of the earth, and as such, it is symbolized by the quaternity of the 4 elements. In the Hebrew alphabet, the only elements present are fire, air, and water. Because these are considered to be the spiritual or volatile elements, the earth is an admixture of these 3 elements combined to form matter. There isn't much to say about Malkut that you probably don't already know. She is the bride of the sun, Christ's bride in the form of the church, Mother Nature, etc. Unlike all the other planets, we have direct experience of the earth, and it is the fertile ground on which we stand, with the exception of a few folks. My attempt at a joke there.
Very witty, Nick. I get it.
All the forces above have condensed to form the world in which we inhabit. Now we are only left with a longing to return, a feeling or a sense that something is lost and needs to be regained, and the path of return begins. Nor will they say, lo here, or lo there, for, behold, the kingdom of God is within you. All right. So that wraps up the tree, and I still have a number of slides. I mean, not too many slides, but yeah, I mean, if anybody has any questions specifically to do with the tree, now would be the time.
I'm holding my comment.
Okay. All right. So I will
I have simple general, actually maybe not simple, but general question. Again, back to, if I have the whole tarot deck, I'm playing with a full deck. And then if I have the whole tree, I'm playing with a full tree. Do you see not just the limitation of the tree as being that which is all of oneself, capital S self, but the places between the tree and around the tree as also somehow attributed to that which is the totality of self? I guess, especially in terms of Jung's sensation function.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I talk about this in some slides that we'll get to in just a second, but just short answer, yeah. I mean, it depends on the tradition. In the Hermetic Kabbalah, a lot of it happened before Jung coined a lot of his key concepts. So there's not a lot of cross-pollination with that, but I also study with an older Jewish lady who's a psychotherapist. here in Boone, and in her tradition, she brings the two together. So she puts the personal unconscious on the tree, the collective unconscious on the tree. I've done work with putting the 4 functions on the tree. So, you know, you can take some liberties and put those things on there, certainly. But
it kind of feels like honestly, to me, it's always felt like a Christmas tree. I just hang these sacred adornments on it all the time, and they just fit. Of course, they then fall off seasonally, but it comes back to what it is. But no, so that I appreciate your response there.
Yeah, and I mean, in some cases, you have to work to make some of the stuff fit. Not so much with the Jungian stuff, because I mean, as it's evidenced throughout the collected works and other writings of his, I mean, Jung was intimately familiar with the Kabbalah,
Right?
certainly.
Right.
But you know, I don't think he ever made any conscious attempt to like really bring the two together.
Okay, I want to show you something, Nick. So
Cool.
on that point, on that exact point, I'd like you to take your share down for a minute, so I can share something.
Yeah. Let's see here.
Okay.
Yeah, give me just a second. I'm not as technologically savvy as I might have you believe.
Well, you should see like a red yod up at the top of your screen.
Stop share. There we go.
That's it. Okay. Now I'm going to share my screen because this is going to be a reference to Jung, as this is a Jungian reading group. Okay, so this is from the Ion Lectures by Edward Edinger, but it refers to some images that are in Ion itself. And I just wanted to point out this setup of the quaternios that he's got. It happens that he's talking specifically here about the Paradise Quaternio, but notice that they're set on top of one another. And what these refer to, this lower piece is just earth, Malkuth, without beings on it, right? It's just the matter, right? And this next level is paradise. It's the Garden of Eden before there's any consciousness from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And then this level is the shadow level, which is the knowledge of good and evil, and therefore man is making all of his mistakes right now. And then the 4th level, and he does these in quaternios, is the anthropos, okay, which is what Jesus was, right? Jesus was the anthropos. So he was above good and evil. And I'm not going to go into this in great detail beyond that. I just wanted to demonstrate that the four dimensions that are related to the tree in the Kabbalah, okay, because what we have here is one dimension or 2-dimensional, right? Not 3-dimensional.
Well,
And
Skip, if I could, your quaternia, I sent Nicholas an image earlier today. Either I can share, Nicholas, if you have it, that had the crucifixion on the tree.
Yeah.
And
I actually plan on talking about that.
Okay, well, these are levels of consciousness too. Okay, so
Skip, what I'm saying is it directly corresponds to what you're talking about, and it actually supports what you're talking about.
Is it possible before that I can just refer back to the picture, the visual?
Sure.
Because I had a comment that I was holding, and it was
of the tree or of what I was showing, Samantha?
Of the tree.
Okay. Yeah. Nick,
and I only said that, Jordan, because he already has the visual for it, and I wasn't sure which visual you were asking for. But
Jordan,
the one.
Jordan, I'm literally about to touch on that. So
I won't.
You go ahead.
I won't show the image, but hopefully I can get pretty close to it. So you want me to share my screen again now?
Yeah, can you share the,
Yeah,
Okay.
go
Yeah.
ahead.
yeah, tree, not tree.
Well, and if
Beautiful,
you
it's not pronounced correctly.
need, I can share it from my photos.
That would probably be easier. I would have to surf through my email. And
Yeah, I
deal
think
with all of
it's
that.
relatively recent. It's only like 50 down or something. So no, well, I mean, email load. So let me know.
Oh,
and
yay. Okay, good. So, well, I guess you guys can't see my cursor, but unless you make me co-host, but
Or just
okay.
refer to the stuff by color if that will help.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll make you co-host.
I wanted the power. Thank you.
If you could point.
Love the dynamism.
Okay, are you able to point?
Yes. Are you guys see this? Testing.
No.
Cursor.
No,
I get it.
Yeah, I
Thanks,
don't know if it will work that way.
I'm just going to use the color for those purposes, but I appreciate you, Skip. So the purple dot circle. I don't
Yeah,
even
right.
But I was thinking about how we have the masculine and feminine in this as well. We were talking about that in so many various ways, but another way this is shown is that does that not mean it has an association with seed? What is one of the
Absolutely,
words?
yeah. I mean, so the purple, which I was about to talk about this in the slide, but we'll just go ahead and get into it.
So the point of
so the yellow central sphere. Imagine yourself backed into this tree. The yellow sphere would be about at your solar plexus. The purple sphere would be in your genital region.
Yes, and so I have a female genital region. So let me sorry for anyone non-binary or you don't know. But what I was trying to say is that the seeds are, you look at the upside down triangle and the shape of a feminine
Yoni.
Vulva.
It's a yoni.
Vulva.
It's a yoni or a vulva.
Whatever, it's fine. So
It's okay, Samantha. It's okay to say those words.
Thank you.
I think we're all over 18, and I think we all know what they are. So keep on talking.
Speak for yourself.
Okay, so the point is that's where we have our eggs. So I was thinking about how the tree is masculine with the branches, they're outward, and I'm thinking about how the roots below. How we were talking before about like the seeds of the tree are contained within the tree itself. So although the tree could be dependent upon the roots, in order to sustain life, that the tree, like women, contain the means by which to continue our own existence within our very bodies.
And if we also just jump past gender and go to Soul Gardener, there is the concept of the oak tree living within the seed. So one seed not germinated simply has everything within it. And that's the ovum that you're talking about. It has everything that's necessary.
And so to say that everyone technically begins as female, but I don't know if that breaks down because of that's embarrassing, but
well, it doesn't because the consciousness is then the male. So you get the idea of figure and ground.
The consciousness is in the collection of the two. Okay.
I'm talking about
yes, but until the male introduces itself, it's not present.
Well, all right, let's tie this up. Let me move on here.
Yeah.
Good call.
Is the Vetuvian man that Michelangelo drew?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Nicholas, may I share?
Let's let Nick go on here, and we can go back to a conversation later.
Yeah, I have something that hopefully will serve as a visual representation of what we're talking about in just once I finish up with these slides here. Okay, so libido, psychic energy. And this is where kind of things take a turn for Jung, so buckle up. In terms of development, knowing the various modes of libido and the way it expresses itself through us, simultaneously shaping us along the way, is of utmost importance. As Jung said, nothing remains for mankind but to work in harmony with this will. To work in harmony with a libido does not mean letting oneself drift with it, for the psychic forces have no uniform direction, but are often directly opposed to one another. So I included that because, as I said, all of these spheres make triads with two things operating in direct opposition to one another, mediated by a third point. Okay, so the tree can be interpreted a number of different ways. One, as from top down, as being the path of emanation. Two, from bottom up, as being the path of return. Three, from a macrocosmic level, used in understanding the cosmos at large. And four, from a microcosmic level, to understand ourselves, and in doing so, maybe understand something about the larger world of which we are a part. For our purposes, as a part of the series of tarot as a roadmap for life, I chose to apply the microcosmic interpretation of the tree in hopes that we might be able to use this as a tool to better understand ourselves, our psyche, and how to better structure ourselves for further success and development.
Great. Good point.
And so now we move to the pathways, and this is where the tarot will make its entrance. So, as you have probably noticed by now, the spheres on the tree make up the minority of the structure that is the tree. Each of the spheres are connected, not every sphere to every other, but most of them, by pathways running between them. There are 22 of these pathways. This is where the major arcana of the tarot becomes involved by way of the Hebrew alphabet. In the Jewish Kabbalah, the tarot is not used for such methods, but in the Hermetic tradition it is. Without going into painstaking detail, I will elaborate on a few of the cards, the Hebrew letter assigned to the card and the path, the intelligence assigned to the path, and the spheres which it connects. The full system is as follows. 1, the card. 2, the Hebrew letter. 3, the elemental, planetary, or zodiacal attributes of the path and card. 4, the intelligence of the path. 5, the spheres which the pathway connects. Okay, so now we have the High Priestess card. The High Priestess is the number 2, but the third card in the series of the tarot. It's the Hebrew letter Gamel, which means the camel. It is the card of the moon. It is the uniting intelligence. And each of the cards and the pathways which connect the different spheres have a different intelligence assigned to them. So like the Lovers is the disposing or discriminative intelligence, and the World card is the administrative intelligence, and this one is the uniting intelligence. So that's something that I thought was extremely useful, particularly for our purposes in the series of tarot as a roadmap for the development. So this pathway connects the sphere of Kether, the uppermost sphere on the tree, to Tiffara, the middle sphere of the sun. Just like Mary, the mother of Christ, was a virgin, impregnated by the Spirit of God, and thus freed from original sin, the High Priestess is thought to be virginal as well. The cross on her chest is a further indication of this. As the camel, she carries the water of life across the abyss which man cannot cross while in the flesh. As mentioned in the slide on Yasad, the moon reflects the light of the sun. When you see a reflection of light on top of still water, you may mistake the reflection for the light itself. Just as the moon governs the tides and other cycles, the High Priestess governs the laws, Torah, of nature. As the uniting intelligence, she comes bearing gifts of the world of spirit and reminders of our true home. She is the messenger of Kether and the mother of Christ. She is seated on a cubic stone. Behind her is a tree of life made up of palms and pomegranates. This is a reference to the Garden of Solomon, as well as the uniting intelligence, as they are male and female vegetation.
I would like to comment.
Okay.
That the concept of virginity. So I would like to point out that this is figurative. The goddess Artemis, for instance, is considered a virgin, right?
Right.
She's a virgin. And that actually represents her independence. So I wanted to say that it
Well, and
is not
purity. It represents also purity.
I mean,
I think that's an interesting idea because again, you know, a lot of religion has been used to oppress people's sexuality, but especially women.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is that the virginity is symbolic. Artemis, what she was goddess of the hunt. I think she had some warlike qualities,
Sure.
but the virginity wasn't meant to be literal. It was showing her power and independence.
It didn't have anything to do with physical virginity.
It has to do with self-containment. It has to do with, you know, also being symbolic to people, to humans, that she isn't a literal corporeal thing and that she is life unto herself.
Right.
Well, and like you said, self-containment, that which is the vessel of completeness of one capital S self. I mean, and Nicholas, you say male and female vegetation. And Jung, that we grew upon the earth, and he mentions the vegetabilis, I think, in the footnotes. I can't remember in which volume, but that we grow upon the earth, and we are just another one of the quote unquote plants, as it were, of nature. And we're not superior. We just happen to be the ones that are conscious. So there's a distinction. I think I can't remember. I don't know which of the 22 volumes of the Bollinger series that was in, but the vegetabilist, when he goes in depth into that, and that which we grew upon the earth.
I would just like to say, while I don't refute anything that you guys have said, I don't feel like it struck the nail right on the head. What I meant by she was a virgin, more in reference to the card and less in direct reference to Mary, is the fact that the high priestess gown here trickles down and turns into water.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, water is said to be the birthplace of all life. So all forms emerge out of water.
Mm-hmm.
And the water can't really be defiled, only the forms which emerge from it.
And I would agree, because to me, the virginity is really a metaphor for intensity, that which is untouched, that which is ungoverned, that which is unsquared. I mean, 100% in identity would be toxic intensity to any one of us if we interacted. But it becomes just that.
I was just thinking
100% intensity of the identity is virginity, where she is pure, not of no inclusions. She's simply capital S. She becomes self.
Yes, and I wanted to say this is also a major arcana card, right? So this goes beyond human, right? Whereas once you strength is major arcana too, but we talked about that the lion can represent sexuality, and the strength, right? We're talking about libido is containment, knowing how to contain that energy. And so here it's a similar concept to me, except here it's
it's certainly similar. And you know, I think it's fair to say that anytime I personally have made reference to anything male, female, we're not talking in terms of biology or literal virginity or anything.
But it's interesting because I never talk about virginity related to the male, which is fine. I don't want to have a whole thing about it, but I'm just saying, you know, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. But
well, she also represents the feminine mystery, or
the unknown,
the mystery of life.
Terra incognita.
Well, yes, and Nicholas, I think you said it before. Solomon sits between, and you mentioned the pillar of Hecken and Boaz, and to me, there are those two pillars, the Hecken and Boaz.
Yeah, I mean that's what is meant by the Hebrew letter Yod and Beth.
Right, and then that becomes Jung's transcendent function in this particular card.
Right,
I never noticed. Sorry, Skip.
The Torah in her lap. Look at her lap.
Exactly. And it just knocks it out of the park.
Yeah, I mean, that was why I put the high priestess governs the laws, Torah, of nature, as the moon governs the cycles of nature.
And the law is masculine in nature, and it's not the literal human corporeal that's in her lap, which also has another reference to sexuality parts. It's the Torah. And then the other thing is, I just want to say, Nick, it's cool that you pointed out the water, because I literally have never noticed that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look behind, and this is a difference. So this is the Bota deck, the builders of the Aditum deck, and the Rider-Waite deck is slightly different from this. In a Rider-Waite deck, she's clearly inside of a temple. And in this one, you can look behind her and see that she really just has something blocking view from the fact that she is amid water. I mean, it looks like she's seated on top of a lake.
Well, and you get to also the Torah and then the yoni that is hidden under the Torah. I mean, there's the seen and then that which is unseen.
And she can't be having a man touch her because she needs to have room for that Torah.
Well, but if she goes behind that veil, you'd be probably amazed at what happens.
This is my oft-repeated comment that the logos, we don't live in the logos, we live in the eros.
Hey.
All right.
Well, it's interesting, Skip. You said that over the last several episodes, several times. I've steeped in that, and it seems to me that the logos, steeping in the agape, steeping in the et cetera, is where we live in various components. Now, I think what your intention is that we live in the eros, meaning that which we can feel. But it kind of drives me back to
it's the structure. It's the fact that all of this that we're talking about is a structure. We're talking about the structure of the Tarot, the structure of the Kabbalah. That's all logos, okay? Eros, where we live, is what we take out of it this evening or anytime.
So
that's
tell
my
me,
point.
And I get your point, I do. So,
and that's the fifth element. That's the quintessence.
Could you expand on Jung's transcendent function in regards to that?
Can we do this later or in another?
Yes.
Time? Okay.
I'm gonna.
Okay, yeah. Let's do this later. Yes, Nick. You're in charge. You have the con.
Yeah.
So moving now to the world, which let's see here. Let me just go back a couple of slides where you can still see the tree. So the previous card, Gamel, the High Priestess, connects the white sphere here to the solar sphere in the center. And, like she's seated in front of a veil, which has this tree on it. And on her chest, or around the solar plexus region, is a cross indicating this solar sphere. So it's like she carries the spirit from this supernal world, the supernal triad, down to the solar cross. And it's the pathway that connects each of those, the blue pathway. And then the next card that I'm going to talk about is the world card, the final card in the tarot sequence. And it connects, still on the middle pillar, it's this bottom pathway connecting Yasad and Malkuth. So it's moving down into materiality. All right. Okay, so the world is the Hebrew letter Tav or Tau, and its symbol is the Tau cross. It is the planet of Saturn. It's the administrative intelligence, and it connects the sphere of Yasad, number 9, and the moon to the sphere of Malkuth, number 10, and the earth. The world card is the Anima Mundi, the world soul. The 4 characters on the outside of the wreath are the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac and the 4 elements, which, as stated previously, condense to form matter and the world. The bull is the fixed earth sign of Taurus. It looks down because earth does not belong to the spiritual elements of fire, air, and water. It is the Hebrew letter Tav, which has the cross as its pictograph, another symbol of the four elements and their interplay. It is noteworthy that the card's character is in a kind of dance, very similar to the dance which Shiva and Nataraja do to set the world into being. The planet Saturn is typically associated with limitation and restriction. Here, the limits of space and time are experienced in their fullness. One must learn to operate in the world of space and time or forever be danced upon. As the administrative intelligence, it is the classification of the world into discrete categories. The best creators break the rules, but in order to break the rules, one must know how first to administer them. The dancer wears a cover over the genital region in the form of the Hebrew letter Kaf, that of Jupiter and the wheel of fortune, guarding us from seeing the dancer's sex. Is she a he or he a she? Or perhaps the alchemical hermaphrodite. Connecting Yasad and Malkut, it is the last stop on the path of emanation, when all things come together from the world. And on the path of return up the tree, it is the first lesson on the way home. Okay, so those are the only two tarot cards which I did. So now we'll just get into some concluding thoughts.
Nick, what's interesting about that last point, especially to get past gender and he, she, and all that, we get the we of the capital S self and the us of the capital S self and the back and forth on the tree. But what's interesting is that a seraphim, that is an hermaphrodite, allegedly, just because they don't have genitalia, becomes that poetic inclusion of all. Is that valid? Or
well, I hadn't made that connection myself, but I think there's certainly evidence for that, considering that if you look at the card, let me just go back to it here. One interesting thing with a Bota deck, and with some of the Rider-Waite decks as well, is if you look at the position of the limbs on the body, they form several alchemical symbols.
right.
And this one, with her legs crossed at the bottom and her arms outstretched coming up to a point, she makes the sulfur symbol, which is a symbol for fire, but also for soul. So, I mean, the seraphim, the fiery ones, certainly fits, although I hadn't thought of it.
But this
Well,
also.
go ahead.
No, I'm passing it to you.
No, I'm done.
Okay. I was just talking.
Let's pass it to Nick and let Nick
Okay,
complete
here,
his presentation. Then we'll have a conversation. Totally free for all.
No, I thought he just did. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I still have just a few more. Okay, so even though some of this has been stated dramatically or poetically, it is my aim to give the viewer something practical to use in everyday life. To me, none of the mystical assertions of any religion or philosophy count for spit if you can't take them home and use them for yourself. That is, to employ them in gaining a deeper understanding of yourself and the world around you. The central pillar of the tree is very similar to the ego-self axis of Jung's map of the psyche and Ed Edinger's later elaborations of the same map. In some different traditions, the spaces in between the paths are associated with the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. For this, see Warren Keaton's books, Zev Ben Shimon Halevi. That is his rabbinical name. Okay, so here are just some quotes to conclude with. This first one is by Eliphas Levi, which was a French magician and hermeticist alive in the 1800s.
Cool.
As an erudite Kabbalistic book, all combinations of which reveal the harmonies pre-existing between signs, letters, and numbers, the practical value of the tarot is truly and above all marvelous. A prisoner, devoid of books, had he only a tarot of which he knew how to make use, could, in a few years, acquire a universal science and converse with unequaled doctrine and inexhaustible eloquence.
Amen.
And yeah, couldn't agree more.
And or a woman. Either way.
But so the next quote here is from Manly P. Hall's tome, Secret Teachings of All Ages, which is a must-have if you are interested in really any mystical tradition. He pretty much covers it all. So from Adam, it passed over to Noah and then to Abraham, the friend of God, who immigrated with it to Egypt, where the patriarch allowed a portion of this mysterious doctrine to ooze out. It was in this way that the Egyptians attained some knowledge of it, and the other Eastern nations could introduce it into their philosophical systems. Moses, who was learned in all the wisdom of Egypt, was first initiated into it in the land of his birth, but became proficient in it during his wanderings in the wilderness, when he not only devoted to it his leisure hours of the whole 40 years, but received lessons in it from one of the angels. Moses also initiated the 70 elders into the secrets of the doctrine, and they again transmitted them from hand to hand. Of all who formed the unbroken line of tradition, David and Solomon were most initiated into the Kabbalah.
Mm-hmm.
And so the recommended authors, let's see here. Paul Foster Case. Anything by Paul Foster Case is going to be phenomenal, extremely reliable. He's considered the world's leading authority on tarot and Kabbalah as a unified system. Dion Fortune has written the classic book Mystical Kabbalah, which is kind of the ultimate introductory text to avail yourself of some Kabbalistic thought and insight. Warren Kenton, that I mentioned earlier, Zev Ben Shimon Halevi, he actually just recently passed away, I think about 2 weeks ago. But one of my teachers here in Boone, which I mentioned earlier, which studies the Jewish Kabbalah and is also a psychotherapist, has received teaching from Warren Kenton and is involved in his tradition of teaching. So I can attest to the fact that is very potent and very, very useful. Arya Kaplan is great. Gershom Shalom is phenomenal. Lon Milo Duquette, he wrote the first Kabbalah book that I ever read called Chicken Kabbalah and Son of Chicken Kabbalah. And those are both phenomenal. Robert Wang, which wrote the Kabbalistic Tarot, and Ann Williams Heller. She's pretty obscure. I actually found the one book that she seems to have written and the one book that I have and have read by her in a small bookstore in California. Just happened upon it, but it turned out to be one of the best Kabbalistic books that I found. So as I mentioned earlier, some authors and people involved in the Kabbalah will intentionally place blinds in their writings, things to confuse people that, if you don't really know up from down yet in the system, they will intentionally mislead you until you know better. So these are some people in which, they don't use those kind of tactics.
Naughty. Oh, they don't.
And I would actually say Lon Milo Duquette especially will elucidate you to please ignore these specific tactics. And he'll give you examples of things to sidestep, because I have to say it this way. It's an old amateur master's trick. I hate to say it, but the master who's still clinging, the master who does not know how to remember why they began, trick to play the third option all the time. There's sometimes you just got to grant the wisdom. And
I think I understand it in part, but I think also times it's just self-serving. I think a lot of people just really want to reserve the real hidden portion of the teaching for themselves and their initiates. And
at the same time, it ends up being self-aggrandizing and frankly, just some hubris of disconnection. And I find that like Lon Milo Duquette will go, hey, have you realized that this and this is bullshit, but this and this, put them together and make this happen? And you're like, oh, all right, I'll buy you a next drink.
You know what?
Yeah, and I mean, Duquette is also just freaking hilarious. I mean, he's just a funny writer and a funny guy in general.
Lon Milo Duquette in person.
Time out, please. Nick, could you remove your share screen so that we can see each other?
Yeah, I just have my contact information here for anybody. If you have any questions or just want to reach out to talk, this is my email. And Yeah, thank you all very much.
Still time out. Okay, this is a group of equals, with Skip being
More equal.
more equal than others, and Jordan being an alpha male. Okay, we have a bunch
I
of.
don't think so. I'm just interrupting.
Okay, no, wait a minute, Jordan. Just let me speak. Okay, we want everybody to have a chance to speak here. Okay, and we hear a lot from Jordan, but we all want to talk. Okay, and so if you're afraid to jump in, please raise your hand too, and I will set this up on gallery view so I can see the automatic raised hand on Zoom.
And Nick just gave me a clue to how to, in one stroke, I will solve this.
I have a legitimate question that's not just to kind of show off that I'm smart.
Okay.
Yeah, fire away.
I'm kind of smart. I'm a little smart. But once you say that out loud, you'll be judged. So it's cool. But whatever. I don't care. So what was my question? Let me pause. It is. Oh no, it flew out of my head. Ah, shit. Never mind. It was a genuine question. It was flagged in my mind. I was like,
Samantha, you can't do that. You can't step up and then step out. Come on.
Okay, well, wait. It had to do with the Torah. And I know. It had to do with are there any flags of a way of knowing when it's just a trick or it's the wrong sign? Are there any flags?
I mean, I don't think you need to be paranoid about it, or not necessarily like paranoid, like with some negative connotation, but you don't need to always be on the defensive against it and really on the lookout. But just they're kind of subtle blinds.
Okay.
If you don't know the systems, you probably wouldn't catch them. But I can't think of anything that would immediately alert someone.
Just curious, because that would be fascinating if there was a way in which they were similar, that we could.
Yeah, Samantha,
well, it really just has to do.
Even with Jung's work, he was saying some things in 1913 that he wasn't saying in 1956. Okay, and so if you start reading his work, for example, if you read the psychological types, you'll learn a lot from it, but you get farther along and you realize, well, he wasn't really thinking that way 40 years later or 30 years later.
That's a great point.
It grows.
Well, and it's swimming with sharks. I mean,
okay, so
thank you. Thanks for answering the question.
So the point is that the Tarot has evolved over 600 years. And so if people don't know, this book, the Library of Esoterica, the Tarot, the first volume that Jordan is in. Okay, so with all due respect to Jordan,
thank you.
What it tells us, though, essentially, is that it hasn't changed a lot. Okay?
Yes.
Even though people keep fiddling around with cutesy names for the suits and that sort of thing, it hasn't changed a lot. And so it is archetypal. And let me just say what my purpose here is. My purpose here in this whole series is to help people have a meditation technique. This is the one time I'm going to say it, okay? Which is, just a minute, I have to add someone here. Okay, so we live in a world of chaos. We're born into that world of chaos. And what we aren't taught, especially if we lose the purchase of our religious system, is we're not taught a way to step out of the chaos and let our psyche reorient itself. Okay. So one purpose of using the tarot as a roadmap for life is simply to give you a chance to slow down, think about these cards, look at them, how are they different? And you will find that you feel better when you do it. Okay. That's the point.
And Skip, I will second that. And that's why I found serendipitously, synchronistically found you, but then I stayed, is because Jung was not the first.
No,
but
he surely wasn't.
But he was the first to be that pervasive and really wrap his hands around everyone else who came before. And it feels to me that your program here wraps itself around everyone who came before through the conduit of Jung. And that to me is just vigilantly important in terms
and through the conduit now of the tarot, which Jung said almost nothing about directly.
Right.
Okay.
Other than books other people wrote about him.
Yeah, but he
yeah,
didn't...
I think that that's really interesting too, because one thing that I've just kind of had on the back burner in my own thinking about this stuff is not so much why didn't Jung talk about it, because I mean, frankly, it probably wasn't that big of a deal while he was alive. I mean,
that's right.
The Rider-Waite-Smith tarot that we know very well really only came out in around 1900, or maybe in between 1900 and 1910.
Right. And there were a couple of world wars and a lot of other crap going on during that.
And his visions. Right.
The thing that I've come to realize is, at least, I don't know that I can speak for everybody on this, but when I think younger people try to approach the idea of Jung, they usually approach it from the idea that's kind of in popular culture of the collective unconscious and archetypes. And, those are two things that are misused a lot. And also, if you look up like, I don't know, Google archetypes or something, like you might get lists of what archetypes are. And, I don't think that was the original intention whatsoever, for them to be listed into discrete categories and, predictable roles and everything, because then they become a sign and not a symbol. But I do also think it's helpful to have a visual representation for these ideas to come into relationship with them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the whole point about the opposites, which is central to everything, is it's thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Okay, the three things, right? And so, as you've pointed out, the Kabbalah has that 3 times going down the Kabbalah. And the point is, and this is what your dreams do, with why it's symbols and why we talk about man and his symbols in Jungian psychology, is that the symbol is the solution of 2 opposites, which are thesis and antithesis. In other words, you have the yin yang going around, right? And that isn't solved until you have a symbol that solves it, right?
Right. And that's really an excellent point, Skip, that the yin yang itself is not the end all be all. That is not actually a syzygy. It's that symbol itself has to rectify itself into reality. And what I love, Nick, about what you did is that you set up syzygies that track themselves through the Sephiroth.
Please define it, please. Syzygy.
Syzygy is an opposed opposite. The mysterium
like the yin and
conjunctus.
yang.
Understood.
Jung called the mysterium conjunctionis. And conjunctionis is just the word conjunction. Latin doesn't have a J. So instead of conjunction, it's conjunction. But Nick, you put together the Sephiroth in a way that tracked to basically, and hopefully Skip will like this because it's Japanese, pachinko ball back and forth to elucidate the fact that it takes the whole tree to make a single syzygy, and at the same time, any connection between any two of the Severoth or the Sephira is itself a syzygy. So there's this shift focus and redirect scale that I just felt as you move through your presentation that was important from it is always present.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly consciously tried to do that. Towards the end, I was saying there are several different levels of analysis that you can apply to the Kabbalah. I mean, you can think about very large scale things, or you can think about very small scale, finite things as well.
Yeah,
And,
and there's
people,
thousands of them. This is only the way to start getting into it.
Right.
So let's talk for a moment about alchemy and the axiom of Maria for a moment. Okay.
Ooh, nice.
Before we do that, may I share a dream with you guys?
Okay.
Nice.
I think this is kind of interesting and funny. So I keep up with my dreams, obviously, and every night I have several that I can remember, which is like both a blessing and a curse. If you're trying to do work with your dreams, it's like, God, I've got 6 and I only have like 12 hours in the day. So one of the dreams that I kind of just halfway remembered from last night, I have written here. Skip and I go to a vineyard with a large stone house on the property. We suspect an alchemist had lived there. And then the words alchem surfaced. It is on American soil. I just thought that was funny and interesting. And in the dream, it was like we went to an American ball engine.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
What does it mean?
Do what?
What does it mean? Reveal to me its sorcery.
Oh, I don't know. You tell me.
I actually think it means what Skip was about to go into is the 1 becomes 2 and the 2 becomes 3 and the 3 or 4.
Yeah, let me put that in real life though. Okay.
I have a question after you, Skip. I have a question when you're done dropping this knowledge bomb.
Yeah, go ahead, Skip.
Okay, the knowledge bomb is
It's grenade.
that the Republican and the Democratic Party are a syzygy. Okay, they can't escape one another. Okay, that's why we have everything is boiled down to 2 parties in this country, because we have boiled it down. People ask, why don't we have multiple parties? It's because other countries don't boil things down, but we, through our debate, have boiled things down, and we can't get away from 2. We have the opposites playing out constantly in our life. Okay.
Are you saying in contradistinguishment to Britain, where they just argue and yell and scream together as one in Parliament?
He's gonna lose his.
No, they have it too. Essentially, they have Labor and Conservative. Okay, which is a little different, Jordan. I don't want to get into the ins and outs. I'm not. No, Jordan, I don't want to get into the ins and outs of.
I just want to set a context to make sure
British
I know
politics
where I'm
versus
thinking.
American politics. This is American.
I just want to set a context to make sure I know where I'm thinking.
Stop fighting.
Okay, so
this isn't fighting. This is just discussing.
So the point is that the Republican and Democratic Party represent a syzygy that can't get away from one another. They're part of one another, right? And they're a perfect one. Okay, so next week on November 3rd, they are going to produce a symbol, a synthesis, which will be the result of the election. Okay. And so, as the Maria Prophetessa said, 1 becomes 2, and that's what's happened. Then 2 becomes 3. So the third thing is this result of the election. And America, on the day after election, is the symbol of the combining of the opposites. Then we know what what America is. On that day, we will know. Okay, however, all right, however, then 3 becomes 4. So in other words, what happens is immediately the synthesis of what America is flies apart, and it becomes 1 again, and it immediately will become 2 again. So 3 becomes 4, which becomes 1 again, okay? But only instantaneously, because 1 immediately flies into a thesis and antithesis again, okay? So in the moment, that the election is decided, will be a symbol of what America is at that moment. Okay,
And
that will be the third thing. It will be the synthesis of the 2. Okay, because that's what an election is. But so it will be the third thing, but the third thing becomes a fourth thing, which is 1 again. Okay, and so 1 instantly becomes 2 again. Okay, instantly there's a thesis and an antithesis again.
You know, Skip, I appreciate the expansive expression of that. And to simplify it, I call it the N+1 philosophy. No matter what you have, there is then the add 1, and it's the whole of the previous.
Say that again.
I appreciate what you just said, the expressing how everything runs and then congealing it into 1. And I call it the N+1 philosophy, where then no matter what happens, no matter how many numbers, N+1, N equals what you said, +1 equals making it into a whole. It's always that number and then a whole. And it's a brilliant expression of how things run, but also are one whole system.
Right. And so this applies to all opposites in your life.
Right.
Male and female, but also salt and pepper and every other darn thing, right?
Right.
Okay. So because we're in the Tarot, I want to share with you my vanity license plate.
Yay.
Oh, this is beautiful.
All right. So this is my vanity license plate.
Oh, my God.
I got this vanity license plate by synchronicity. I got it 3 years ago. I had it was shown to me at an auto dealership because my wife and I wanted the great blue heron there, and which is a symbol of Maryland. And this is the license plate they pulled out. So I immediately said I wanted it because I immediately saw that it was 3 7s
Right.
that add to 21. Okay. And
your tags are also 21.
Yeah, and when I changed cars, I insisted on getting this, but this is getting this moved to my new car, right? And that's why it expires in January of 21. Okay, which is also, as Jordan pointed out the other day, a quaternity because it's 121. Okay,
Right, a quaternity of 7s.
Right, and so 3 represents the syzygy, the thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, and we've got it here, and we've got the couple here, the 2 and the 5, which represents the changing, and so it adds to 21, which is 21 cards other than the Fool, and the Fool is the driver of this car.
that was my favorite part in your last presentation.
Pardon?
It'll become the Chariot in due time.
Yeah,
right?
well, it is already the Chariot.
Yeah, Skip, I thought about this, like, I don't know, 10, 20 minutes after that episode, and I thought, if you get stopped, what happens if you say, "Did you see my license plate?
Yeah, well,
Do you know who I am?" So,
I guarantee they won't get it.
So-
and he'll be arrested for being insane or something. And then
so the point is,
break you out.
I'm putting an idea out there in the world, okay, which is a vanity license plate that only a few of us know, and I have it for Maryland, but you can get it for your own states.
Thank you, Skip.
And so only those who are read in will understand what your license plate
I
is.
appreciate that you shared that. That's it was funny the first time, but it actually, I don't know how it's funnier now. So thank you.
I want to ask a question.
Go now, go.
My question is, what is the difference? You talked about signs versus symbols.
Yeah. So Jung talked about how in trying to really just distinguish his approach towards dream analysis from Freud, that the Freudians wanted to establish a concrete set of symbols. So, for instance, if a woman dreams of a snake pursuing her, that means that she has there's some latent meaning that she's essentially, longing for a male companion.
Everything
And they want to refer to that every single time that a snake appears in a dream. And Jung didn't agree with that for a host of reasons, but namely because he said you need to take into account the functionality of the snake in the myth in which it might reference to. If it's a snake in reference to Asclepius, it might be different than a snake in the Garden of Eden. So you can't make it a fixed symbol. I mean, you can't make it a fixed sign in that it refers to everything that's consciously known about it, but it always has to be a living symbol. It has to be something that is interpreted rather than just referred to as a stop sign means stop.
Co-creation.
And I'm sorry, Nicholas, what I love most, I remember being in a graduate psychology class in a graduate philosophy class my freshman year, and that came up.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one eyebrow went up. And then I thought, why the hell did one eyebrow went up? I don't know anything about this shit. I'm a freshman. The fuck?
Please keep our language clean here, Jordan.
Okay, I will. But I was like, there are graduate level physics and math and psychology and philosophy majors, and I'm the fish. Why did my eyebrow go up? But the professor went, Jordan, why did your eyebrow go up? And then it just got real, because I went, well, I wonder, did Jung dispense with the semiotic and go to epistemology and just let it ride? And I stopped. And I remember thinking, and I will not quote what I said, D-A-F, and I'll stop the rest of the letters to keep the language clean. What did I just say? And he went, amen, brother, but what do you graduate students have to say? Because the fish just spoke. And I remember thinking, oh, wow, I'm going to get my butt kicked. Because, at that point, you're just in that odd place, but in a beautiful place. But it feels like Jung dismissed with the semiotic, which is very static. It has to do with inherent meaning that will not change. But the epistemology of the science of how we know things has a lineage.
Jordan.
And
so
he let
Jordan,
it go.
One value that I have on this YouTube channel is to not use these words semiotic and epistemological and so on. Okay, because those are highfalutin buzzwords that philosophers use to confuse the average citizen. Okay,
I appreciate that. And I respect that.
This YouTube channel is about helping the average citizen to understand their own psychology.
And in that
Okay,
spirit,
so
Jordan,
as hold on,
you-
Samantha.
in that
Hold on,
spirit,
pardon,
fish
Samantha.
means a freshman. For anyone who's not a native English speaker, when he said that he, as the fish, spoke up, it means he was younger or he was earlier in his journey of education than the others. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
So he
but
got-
now I'm not, and so I
Yes.
will rephrase, and I appreciate that, Skip, because I will not use those terms. Nick,
Okay.
it was
I mean,
interesting
every
to
time
me.
somebody the reason I say this, Jordan, is every time somebody uses epistemology, I have to go look up the meaning of it. And then I always forget what it means.
And I do
Okay.
too, even when I'm using it. So I get it. So Nick, so thank you, Skip. So Nick, in that Frosh class, there was this static thought pattern that people referred to with this other word. And Jung seems to sidestep that static thought pattern that has that abstruse, overly intellectual word. But he goes to the organic with the words that don't need to be there. So there's a process and he allows it. And it seems to me that from especially the way you express the Sephiroth and from, let me back off of the first word I didn't use and jump onto the second word I want to use but won't. There's a lineage that he incorporates in every single thing he writes. And whether it's 14th century Hermes Trismegistus, hope that's not too much, Skip, but you know, the thrice-born, etc. Every time he uses a word and it's dropped into Greek or Latin footnotes, it's present. Not important, it's present. So, I mean, can you speak to that from, because I mean, your presentation really elucidated a path through the tree of life. And that to me, you basically spoke a lineage and you basically spoke a path. Can you, in an overarching way, express, hey, this is what the tree of life means to me? Skip, does that go fine without the wrong words?
Yeah,
I
let's
can
have
try.
Lawrence answer that, or Nick
All right.
answer that, and then I want to answer the question about sign and symbol again, too.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, I feel like I could answer it at so many different levels, but I think the level that's relevant to what we've discussed here and what we're going to continue to discuss is it's really an archetypal framework. And, you know, I think also to just say something about Jung's constant use of Latin and Greek and everything. I mean, I think it's kind of, I found that peculiar when I first started reading him, but I've actually grown to love it because it's just made me look into other languages with great interest, but also come to realize that the etymology of pretty much any word that we might say or use today has its roots in Latin or Greek.
Right.
So I mean, he's going right to the source, and something is kind of lost in the way that we speak about things. I mean, just for example, you know, when we say inspired, we don't think that it means in breath, in spirit. Or
Right.
when we talk about symbols, we don't realize that it's sun Balin to throw together. You know, and that's something that's really lost. And you know, when you talk about things like Hermetic magic or any offshoot of it, you know, you're talking about people that were using sound and vibration and all of these things to, I don't really love this word, but essentially to make things manifest. They really understood the potency of spoken words.
Yes, and I
Well,
wanted
the abracadabra.
that also.
I mean, they left the Latin and they left their origins to birth from their origins.
Okay,
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of like
I want to say something. I want to
Okay,
say
yeah.
something. I'm going to elbow my way in here for a sec, get in the game. So, Nicholas, what you said reminded me of a point that I wanted to make for a while, which is that Africa, being the birthplace of civilization, also relied initially on oral tradition. So I think that's an interest, and which Europeans said made them a quote unquote dark continent, that they used, that they passed things down orally, but it's the same here.
I mean, tons of people did that. I mean, that's why there's no written record of any of Socrates' philosophy either. Is he never wrote anything down. He would just transmit his teachings orally.
Right. So that's also a way to keep lines of knowledge pure, if you will, because it's person to person. And I would like to also say that adding to, this isn't in refutation, this is adding to that there are languages that don't originate from Latin or Greek, but
there are, but I should have said the antecedents to European or English language.
Right, because we're not the whole, it's not the whole world, but it makes sense in this setting because the languages represented do have their origins in that. But I was just thinking about, certain dialects of Asian languages. So I just wanted to.
I also think a lot about, the story of the Tower of Babel is, like, in my mind, the most relevant myth that speaks to exactly what we're talking about. These prideful people tried to build a tower into the heavens, and the Spirit of God struck them down and confounded their language to make it to where they couldn't understand one another. And I mean, really think about what that means. That means that the Logos, this creative principle, was confounded and wrapped up in a way to where man could no longer speak something into existence because people couldn't understand him, or we couldn't understand one another. And I think about how language in America continues to devolve through use of social media and texting and stuff like that. Like, we're essentially like, so many people that I know, like, I don't know how old you are. I would estimate that we're probably a similar age. I'm 26, but several people that I know seem to have lost their ability to speak eloquently and to really say what they mean more times than not. Like I hear so many people say like 15 times in a sentence.
It's okay.
And I just wonder about what that means with that kind of biblical story in mind.
This is the point I want to make about signs and symbols. Okay. The word tarot is a sign. Okay. It means a card game that has 78 cards in it traditionally. Okay. But this is a symbol. It's a symbol of everything that the tarot has meant since the beginning. And the word tarot on this book is a symbol. Okay. This is the Encyclopedia of Esoterica, right? This is a symbol, this book. Okay. And the word tarot on this book is really referring to everything that's in this book. Okay. You don't need anything more. This word tarot has the meaning of that as a symbol. Okay. As a sign, it simply means the card game that kids pick up, and it has 78 cards in it, right? It has major and minor arcana. That's a sign, okay? Mm-hmm. And it's a very simplified level. And so Jung talked about this. I'm going to find you the quote. I think I have it marked directly. Okay.
I mean, I think it also just has a lot to do with the fact that, a sign is conscious. A symbol has to be unconscious.
Right. Okay. Because there's so much that a symbol means that you can't even begin to tell somebody. Like when we're not quarantined, we go to the yacht club, and every evening at sunset, they douse the American flag and they play Retreat the Colors. Okay. And and they fire the cannon when they do that. Okay, well, the American flag as a piece of cloth is a piece of cloth, and it sort of says America, right? But I can't avoid weeping when they do that, okay, for a variety of reasons. I'll tell you one of them, and that is when they do that ceremony, I think of the 5 men who died to protect that flag, okay? And so when they execute that ceremony, it brings to me everything that flag and the ceremonies and the cannon fire has meant to me in my whole life, okay, because I've been connected with the military my whole life. And so I can't not weep. It's like I can't talk about the Navy hymn without weeping. If I get into detail about it at all, it has so much symbolic meaning to me that I can't even talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, Jordan, the number of the Navy hymn in the hymnal at the Naval Academy is 808, just so you know. You're muted, Jordan. So whatever.
I was going to say 808, and yes, and my grandfather said that, and he said, "Oh, and that's 7." And I went, "What? What is that?" He goes, "You'll figure it out one day." And 8 and 8, 16, 1 plus 6 is 7. But that was his way of giving me a path out of the problem, or of, and
okay.
but
And that's
no,
an answer to Michael Carpentino on YouTube, who was asking about numerology. So you just gave an example of it.
I did, and I have to say, Skip, that you have that ritual. Thank you. That I don't know the words. Poignant, powerful, meaningful. Thank you. I think the 2 words are thank you, because the fact that you weep, to me, in those kind of places, I know from my perspective, my tears are sacred adornments, and I couldn't be more present than in those places. So thank you for sharing that you do that there.
And I also wanted to thank you, Skip. I also wanted to say that that hip hop started in the United States, and that's a good example of well, it started in Africa, but it's a good example of symbols changing, as well as the American flag, because I can think of after September 11th here, right, how they showed footage of people burning the flags, but it was from years earlier. It was part of our country's propaganda, our government's propaganda, right? And what my sister told me at the time, I think this is really cool, is, you know, because some of us who are more liberally inclined, right, left of center politically, we're like, I don't want to tote my flag around because people might associate it with this conservative, you know, the neocons. Well, they weren't called neocons back then, or propaganda. However, what she said is in a lot of other countries, when people wear the flag, it is a sign not of being, I'm with my government. It's a way of saying, this is my country, the country of the people, not just of the so-called elite. So once again, those symbols, I can see how the American flag would represent something to you personally. And I do thank you for sharing that story. And then for other people, you know, it might mean something else, you know?
And I just want to observe that those people who are burning the flag, I also weep about them, but not because I'm angry at them, because that flag represents the right to do that. Okay. And when I served, and I still have maintained my commission in the Marine Corps, my service in the Marine Corps has always been about the right to freedom of expression, which includes the right to stomp on the flag, burn it, to rip it up, do anything you want on it.
Well,
Because that's what the United States stands for. Okay.
And actually to drop back to the tree, and maybe this is a magician, high priestess reference, maybe not, but 2 quotes. One, Voltaire: I wholeheartedly could not disagree with you more, and I could not ever not go to my death to defend your right to say that. And then Mark Twain: patriot? I'm a patriot always, 100% of the time. I support my government only when it deserves it.
Right. Because I think of, for instance, slaves, and I know my history on my dad's side of my family. I mean, I've seen the documents, and we've had an education in my family literally since slavery. At 9 years old, the first person in my family to become literate went on to be involved in government, be involved in education, and he did not learn to read until 9 years old. And you can find him on Wikipedia. So anyway, my point is what's my point? Oh, I think of people who were slaves who decided to fight because they wanted freedom. So to me, the freedom, I associate the freedom with that. So I think it's interesting, the different points of view that we come from. That's, for me, more emotional.
Well, and that's what I stand for too.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me read this paragraph from the Red Book. Okay, because it also relates to this issue of words as symbols. Okay. So in the Red Book, Dr. Jung is, this is on page 244 of the Reader's Edition for those who want to follow it. And in this passage, Dr. Jung is talking about the Bible, okay? And he's talking to a hermit who is studying the Bible in great detail. And this is imaginal, right? So when I say I, this is the imaginal Jung says, okay, so
right.
I thank you for your patience, but it matters very much to me to know how you read and what you take from this book, meaning from the Bible. The anchorite responds, your question is not easy to answer. It's easier to explain colors to a blind person. Okay, colors are symbolic, right? You must know one thing above all. A succession of words does not have only one meaning, but men strive to assign only a single meaning to a sequence of words in order to have an unambiguous language. This striving is worthy and constricted and belongs to the deepest layers of the divine creative plan. On the higher levels of insight into divine thoughts, you recognize that the sequence of words has more than one valid meaning. Only to the all-knowing is it given to know all the meanings of the sequence of words. Increasingly, we try to grasp a few more meanings. Okay, so that's what I mean when I say the words, the Tarot, signify this card game or these cards, but they have more than one meaning. Okay, and now they're going to have 92 meanings and 92 cards instead of 78. And so
that deck is 92 cards?
Yes. And,
okay.
And so the Tarot, this Tarot book is some of the meanings. It's striving to talk about some of the meanings of the Tarot, but it has way more than one meaning. Okay.
And it's a composite of over 500 images from 570 years. The best of, as it were. I think Jessica Hundley put it together.
Well, and it's symbolic of all the other cards that were ever created in all that time, too.
Right, exactly.
I think it's, I'm just kind of spitballing here, but I think it's really interesting. And I've kind of mentioned this before, you know, because when we do our normal meetings, we talk about 5 to 10 to 15 various cards or various iterations of the same card. And I've often wondered, you know, when you can add or remove certain elements of the symbolism in the card, how far can you go with it still keeping its essence? And I mean, it's been proven that it can go pretty far. But what I'm essentially coming to realize is that essentially we're describing like a complex. There's like a complex of all these tarot ideas with this archetypal center. And I've just wondered, you know, like if there were 100 different depictions of the Wheel of Fortune, like there would still be this center that's kind of unexpressed.
I think there is, and I will say this as a tarot author, a tarot creator, and a tarot reader, and then a tarot historian. I'm kind of a Formula One driver, and I want the right fuel, and it doesn't matter how many there are. You just need to get me those bolts set right, those tires pressurized right, get me around this track. So I think no matter what you have, just a bare bones vehicle or the whole shooting match. I mean, Skip's going to drop in all of the pieces and parts of what we're talking about here. And you are too.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Well,
Okay.
but I mean, in general, this is an overarching webinar. So
yeah,
there's not a simple, oh, we're only talking about this. I mean,
right. But Susie and I did a divination this afternoon with one tarot card. Okay.
And before you go, Skip, may I? I'd like to read from the Temple and Man, R.A. Schwaller de Lubisch work in regards to this, I think specifically.
You don't want to hear what the card is that we pulled?
No, I do, but I want to hear it after. Just kind of like the Tiffara.
Okay, how long is your reading? How long is your reading? We've been at this for nearly 3 hours.
5 lines, it looks like.
All right, go ahead. Go for it.
So, Nick, I read this in kind of effigy and also thanks to your, I kind of like that more, that you had no, stop the word, idea about Tiffara Absolute with my magical energetic stairs with my 6 of Wands and the attribution. And I looked that up this afternoon and I just went, oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's the way my dyslexic creativity. Okay, good. Okay, good. So there's the collective unconscious. And Skip, I want to hear this card, but I want to hear it after what I read. So
read. Go ahead. Go.
So, and I don't think the word semiotics in here, but I can't guarantee it.
Yeah.
So symbolic representation and imagistic writing are the pure hieratic forms of esoteric expression.
Says heretic.
Through symbolism, through symbolism and through it alone can we read the thought of the ancients. It is only through the symbolical that we'll be able to coordinate the known elements of this great civilization, and that the writing may take on its true meaning.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, I've said in previous discussions, I don't use tarot for divination. That's just never been something that I personally have been interested in doing. I really have just studied the cards for several years. And what I've found is that simply just meditating on the cards by just holding the image in your mind, things it's almost like they begin to have an effect on you more than
Yes.
you have an effect on them. And certain things begin to come out of them. And, often I wonder, like, where does some of this stuff come from?
Okay,
And it's
so
almost
Well-
like we're
well, and
communicating in this
have you read your
symbolic
5
way.
lines yet, Jordan?
Yes.
Excuse me?
Yeah,
Have you
he
read
did.
your 5 lines?
That was it.
No, I know I did. That they were done, but hold on, really quick, Nick. I call that a came to mind reading, because there are times when I don't even draw a card comes to mind, and there's the collective unconscious. That's divination at work,
Okay,
and that's outside
I'm
of
going to give
this
you an
because-
opportunity to give us a reading, and Nick can comment on it
Not
too.
tonight, not
right.
tonight.
Well,
Actually,
you don't have to, but I want to show you what we drew this
Yes, please.
afternoon. Okay,
please.
because the question very simply was, what's going to happen in the election, if I'm correct.
Okay.
And so I said, okay, we'll draw one card. And can
Oh
you guess?
wow, just
Can
one.
can you guess what it is?
Is it the full
The
deck?
tower,
What
Is it the full deck?
the world.
Oh my God, we drew death.
No,
Is it the whole deck that you're pulling from?
Yes, it's the Rider-Waite Hold deck. I'm going to share
The
the
world.
card.
I think it's the world.
Mm,
It's either the tower or the world. It's the tower.
It's really more like the Ace of Pentacles. It's just such a small man.
The fool. Come
I'm
on, you're
gonna
killing
say-
me. Just show us the card.
I'm gonna
Okay.
get
It's
into
just
the
such a
Here
small
it
man.
comes. Here it
Let me
comes.
lodge a
Power
damn
of the
guess.
world.
Here
Ace
it
of
comes.
Pentacles.
There it is.
Oh,
There it is.
good.
Oh, I guess, hooray. Finally, the election is
Oh,
over.
freedom high day. Jeez.
Oh,
Now I don't know what to do
Yeah.
with myself.
I love loaded
All the
questions.
Well, have you voted yet? If you haven't voted yet, get
No,
your-
yeah,
I haven't.
I got my notification a week and a half ago that my vote had been received and counted.
Okay.
Why
so-
did now I'm getting emotional. I don't even know what to do. I think I'm feeling a feeling. I don't know.
You think you're feeling a feeling?
Yes, I don't
That
wanna-
sounds a little melodramatic.
It's just a lot. Well, I am dramatic. So anyway, I come by it very honestly. I hope, well, I
Don't we all?
No,
Yeah.
I mean,
Definitely.
I've known for months that this election was going to be a landslide.
Yeah, it's one way or the other.
Well, no, it's going to be a landslide against the president. If I'm wrong, I may be wrong, but you know,
I'll go to Vegas with you on that, Skip. I will.
I never leave Vegas without more money than I came.
Well, and I'll go to Vegas with you on that one.
I would like to continue our conversation and add a new thought to this jambalaya, add a new spice to the jambalaya,
Go for it.
which is that this is how new cultures are born. When you were
Sure.
talking about language changing meaning, and this is exactly what happened with the enslaved Africans who were brought here on ships by the Europeans. They were mixed. They took people from different countries who did not speak the same language purposefully so that they couldn't communicate to escape. Then when they got here, they had rules of other languages. For instance, the double negative, which exists in Spanish and French, was also in many African dialects. So they had the rules of, with their mind had imprinted on their minds the rules of their language and the pieces of English. And then it gets even more complicated because let's say you're living on a plantation as an enslaved person and they couple you, because they would put people together with, here's this person's gonna be your mate, okay, whether that would happen naturally or was forced, who speaks another language. So you both speak English with an African, the brain of an African dialect. You guys know what I'm saying, it's starting to fall apart a little, it'll come back together. Learning English, and then, you know, there's a different way of speaking with the person who owns you, the person you have children with. and then your children learn English like that. So I just wanted to speak to the legitimacy of that process and how this is what happens with language all the time. Go to New York and see how many different dialects of English there are, or the Appalachians, except it's really only been, in my opinion, Black people who it's been so taboo and it's this evolving language. It's actually evolving.
Don't you
So I
mean-
wanted to speak
you
You
to
know,
mean
I
Appalachia?
have to say, Samantha,
Let's
there's
get
absolutely
about
there's no pushback whatsoever as to language evolving, and there's no pushback as
Culture
to
evolved
that.
that way.
Hold on, about
That's
that particular cultural piece. But I have to say, from a feminist, sexist, masculinist, et cetera, I can't focus on that just one thing. And I hate to put it this way, but that just one thing to me is selfish. There's a whole world here. And what I would like to look at is, how can the tarot look at that?
I'm not sure what you mean by
hold on. How can the tarot look at that and actually speak to it? Because the reality is, I grew up in the South, and specifically Texas. So, you know, we shoot first and we aim later.
I've lived in Texas.
But what I look at is, I'm not going to take on a token activism in one spot. I'm looking at the whole world of the collective unconscious.
With all due respect, Jordan, that's cool that that's your decision. But to say that my entering that into the discussion is selfish is really
No.
Really
you are not selfish.
because what I'm saying,
You are not selfish.
I would like to finish because my background is both African and European. So that affects my worldview. And I thank the woman who put in the chat that it's not just Black people, right? But the lens through which I view it is as an American with a Black father and a white mother. So when, in the same way that Skip was talking about how symbols can be fixed in our brain, I have a certain point of view about race and culture that has been influenced by the integration of those specific seeming opposites. So I see it everywhere. So it's not a token activism. I come by that very honestly.
No, and I am in no way demeaning you. This is a matter of the fact that as the martial artist, if I pull my card from Korea out, I just basically sabotage myself.
I don't know what that means.
It's like, that means if I get stopped for a speeding ticket, I just say, yes, sir, no, sir. Okay, what I need to do, sir. What I'm saying is, you have a very specific piece here, and a very specific piece that I support, frankly.
Okay, well,
But what
I'd
I'm
like to
saying,
make one.
hold on one skip. Let me finish. Samantha, to respect what you said, it's not about any single piece. There's so many vigilances.
The point that I was
but
making,
what
that
we're
new
talking
cultures
about
are
here is
developed
the collective
through
unconscious,
That
and
was
we are all included.
Right. That's the point that I was making, that through the integration of opposites, a synthesis is born.
Yes.
Right. Now let me make my observation based on that comment. Okay. My observation is this. While everything you said is true, Samantha.
What are you talking to? Oh, me?
Yeah, everything you said is true, and everything that Jordan says is true. But in terms of what it means to be American and how we speak, okay, what is true is that all the people that are North Americans in this conversation sound the same now,
Right.
Okay.
Well, we haven't really heard from our Spanish speakers or excuse me, Portuguese and whatever. We all sound the same. but we
But
haven't
what
really heard
Skip
them.
said is
They've
that
been
the
silent.
ones who are North
No.
American do sound the same.
Right.
And we
so-
kind of get lost in our sameness.
And so what is
No,
the
I just-
meaning? No, wait a
I
minute.
translate
Okay,
the way
please-
I speak in academic environments.
Okay, please
So I
hear
can
what
speak
I,
languages that you guys aren't familiar with because I am a person of color and because of my exposure to Spanish living in Texas and
We
being
are all
an
a person of
ambiguous
color.
okay.
being an
I'm gonna
ambiguous
ask
brown-
us, I'm gonna ask Samantha and Jordan both to mute your mics just for a minute so that I can make my
I'm
point.
gonna eat peanut butter while you talk, so it'll
Okay,
keep
this is about culture. Why is the United States the only country in the world that has people trying to immigrate to it from every country in the world? Okay, and what it means to be American in the sense of an American citizen. And Canada is close to that. But the point is that we've taken all these differences and we've amalgamated them, and our language is a symbol of that. The fact that we all sound the same, that our accents are all similar now. I mean, if we had talked to Nick 40 years ago, he would have had a very distinct Southern accent. Okay, very distinct, probably.
Do I not now?
You don't now.
It's very
Oh
slight.
oh
I can
my,
tell.
you just sound a lot like
It's
Right.
You
very
just have to hear me
slight.
on certain
And
days.
so the language that what you're talking about is symbolic of that fact and what it means to be an American, as in a U.S. citizen. Okay.
Yes.
And it's now expressing itself out into the world. So
Mhm.
now when I went to India the first time in the 90s, early 90s, Indians sounded like Englishmen with an accent, okay, an Indian accent. But nowadays, if you talk to an Indian, pretty much they're going to sound like an American. Okay, so what's symbolically happening around the world is we're amalgamating. Now, it's not only language, it's everything. Okay, so that's cultural development. Okay,
Mhm. Yes.
so in other words, okay, I have one of my sons-in-law is a Korean American. He was born in Korea, and but if you spoke to him on the telephone, you would not know he was Korean in origin. Okay, you would not know. He speaks exactly like you speak, and exactly like Susie speaks and Nick speaks, because he came here when he was 4 years old. So the cultural amalgamation has occurred, and so the American flag, among other things, is a symbol for that as well. Okay.
Well, what I was trying to say is that I think, and it's difficult to do because when I came into this group, you know, I was amongst, I think when I came here the first time, it was all of the three men, you know,
Yes, correct.
here and me.
Correct.
So it makes sense that by population alone, there is a view that is of European and male origin. Now, this is the country I was born into. So I've understood that for my whole life. It's not a matter of begrudging that, but it is very important to understand that each of us has biases that we're not even familiar with. And so
Truly.
I feel some sense of responsibility as a woman and a person of color, and just to represent my own damn self, to
Sure.
say how I feel and what I think. The center, what you may find to be the center, Jordan, isn't the center. And this is why I was speaking about the American flag, because I could understand as a military person, I can only imagine what it's like to have that emotional connection. But what I'm saying is I'm descended of slaves, okay, who the American flag doesn't necessarily mean this sign of freedom. In fact, it's the opposite. It's
But
slavery.
yes, which
And
is
for a
which is
lot of
the
people-
shadow.
And for a lot of people, absolutely. And for a lot of people in the world, the American flag means oppression, colonialism, and so on and so forth. And I don't think
Precisely.
we can be complete as a country without looking at that, without shutting it down. And people wonder why people get angry.
Right. And it's a symbol of that too, right?
Yeah, right. And you have to also add
Somewhere
that the
in
British.
between,
You guys,
somewhere in between is the answer.
Okay.
It's both of them.
Raquel would
But-
like to speak, so let's give Raquel
She would,
a
and
chance.
before she does, really quickly, and we also should add that the British colonial flag has about 1.6% more colonialisms than the American flag, but it's the same point you just made. Just
Okay,
another
let's
example
move
of the
on.
same point.
Raquel, go ahead.
I just want to say that I think that what you guys are talking about symbolisms, symbols always triggers some kind of memory, you know.
Yeah.
So in each individual is going to trigger something different. But in respect of cultural, and I think I have like this weird vision because in here I am an outsider, you know. But what Samantha said about like Africans dealing with their own history and knowledge through speaking, through speeches, you know, orality. For us, that Brazilians, that still exists, you know. And here in Brazil, I am a white person, but outside of Brazil, I am a person of color. So
I relate.
that triggers like different aspects of it. But orality itself is like the memory that you can receive from someone else is like a more human memory. I mean, it's kind of like the story of my family I can only know through my people, through my family, through the person, through them
Sure.
speaking to me, you know.
Right.
And so that lineage is most based on indigenous background and African background. So that's really important for us, you know, but not in a sense that all written words are not just as important, you know, because here in Brazil, the knowledge that an African Brazilian person has to create, it's like double the work. The
Yes.
Black person has to know the Black history, but they have to master the white history. You know, if they don't master the white history, it doesn't matter.
They don't
you know.
survive.
Yeah,
Which
exactly.
is why if you were
Right.
able to be multilingual, like my great-great-grandfather, who the reason he was able to learn to read is because slavery ended and he was freed. And they walked, this is my family's oral history that I'm sharing with y'all. He walked 300 to 500, depending on which historical book you read, on foot to go to learn how to read in a boxcar in Atlanta. And some of us have had to be freakishly talented in order to get to the same place as some
Samantha, what we know is you are freakishly talented because you were complaining that there were three men and you the only woman.
I wasn't
When you
complaining.
when you started, but now
was
there are
stating
six.
fact.
Now there are 6 women and 3 men.
I attracted it.
So now
so,
we
so the culture
we
is
have a-
evolving.
So Samantha,
Yeah.
now we have a problem.
But to be
There's
clear,
an imbalance.
I was not complaining. I was stating a fact. I don't want that
No, it's fine.
respectfully.
It's fine.
No, it's
We
beautiful.
we
It's just
accept the
beautiful.
fact.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Can I just ask, do you guys have any other questions for me? Anything
No, sir.
relevant
I
to
don't.
what
You
this
know-
presentation was supposed to be about?
We've sort of devolved. So
Well, but
so often, Nick?
I haven't actually devolved to. I still have. And could you speak to the pillars of Hakan and Boaz? I mean, Solomon sits, and that's kind of the high priestess. but that's Jung's transcendent function from the High Priestess card. Could you speak to the High Priestess card being Jung's transcendent function?
Well, I haven't made that association. Had you?
Well, I don't know. You mentioned pillars, Haken and Boaz. Solomon sits between Jung's transcendent function, and I just kind of went, oh, those two pillars, Boaz, Haken, and there's the High Priestess.
Well, no, I mean, I think what I was saying was, for the first aspect of it, the High Priestess does sit in between these two pillars, which has the Hebrew letter Beth and the Hebrew letter Yod. Yod
Right.
is a J, so it symbolizes Haken. And Beth is a B, so Boaz. And those two mean strength and mercy. I mean, those are the two pillars of the tree, the two outside pillars. And I mean, they're also in Masonic temples. And you know, you see them in the Hierophant card, although they're
Right.
not labeled.
Right.
Because it's exoteric. But I think what I was saying was that that Tiffara was the transcendent function,
Okay.
or something approximating the transcendent function, because it's always these two opposites, the two opposites of Haken and Boaz, of strength on the one hand and mercy on the other, are mediated by this third point that emerges from the tension of these two opposing forces.
Which is beauty, right?
And, I mean,
which is beauty.
right?
So I
What I also
appreciate
call
you
the seat of
dropping
the
down
self.
to
All right.
Tiffara.
Let me speak to the question of the transcendent function, okay? Because that is relevant here. Okay, the transcendent function has to do with connecting the conscious mind to the unconscious mind. So behind the High Priestess is the unconscious, the mystery of the unconscious.
Right.
And so the High Priestess is on the conscious side. She's on the physical manifestation side. She guards the gate to the unconscious. Okay. And so, yes, to the extent that that is true. Okay. But I mean, but for Raquel's point, you know, in all opposites, there's one thing and then an other thing. So Raquel identified herself as an other, as in not American, and Nicole did the same thing. Welcome back, Samantha. I'm glad you weren't angry with us. I was worried.
I resurrected.
Okay. I'm glad you. So
you're very Fekin Phoenix.
Well, we're very glad that you're contributing to the new culture here, but the point is that the other is always the unconscious. Okay, in the context of the transcendent function. Okay, so whatever you think is absolutely true, there's never going to be any different thing from that. Then there's another.
Not every Republican is a bad person. I can't believe I said that. Just kidding. It's fine.
Not every.
My grandma was a Republican. My Black grandmother was a Republican.
Not every Republican is a bad person, and not every Democrat is a
That
good
was
person.
a different time.
Also true. Also true.
Well,
Okay,
what
we agree.
Okay, to the point about my prophecy about the landslide, let me speak to my prophecy. What's happening in the news media is they're talking about who's voting in early voting, okay, and they're gradually showing that more and more Republicans are voting to, and the implication is that Trump is catching up, okay, but the point is that Trump is not a Republican.
Judge not by appearances.
And so therefore it's not self-evident that all Republicans who are voting are going to vote for him. That's my point.
No, and that's.
I think you should look at some of Nostradamus's prophecies. They're
Oh
Pretty-
no!
pretty
oh,
foreboding.
No, no, no! Oh, you're so right, but I don't want to go there again.
Well,
Oh,
yeah.
again.
I just want to read tarot cards and create art and have fun. And I
Right.
have all this extra emotional labor to do because, some people can't get their stuff together.
Yep.
And I'm
Well, that's what we're doing. We're helping.
Well,
people
that's
get their
what Skip.
stuff.
That's what Skip sets up here.
Yeah. The
That's
point
what
is,
Skip
we're
sets
born,
up here.
we're born into chaos, and the tarot cards are a way to step away from the chaos and just look at a card. Okay, like we were looking at the 10 of Cups, and what does that mean to me? And just
I would like to just add something to that. I mean, it just dovetails perfectly on that. I included the intelligence in the interpretation of the cards because I thought it was relevant to what you're doing with this course here. And I can just speak to it personally because when I came upon that for the first time, I was thinking, isn't it very peculiar that there might be 22 modes of intelligence or 22 modes of consciousness? And I mean, that's not to say that it's completely fixed. There could be 30, there could be 19, whatever. But just the idea that there is a structural component to consciousness, and that it needs to be organized rather than just, chaotic and just uncontrolled completely. And I mean, that was a revelation for me personally. And to try to understand what is meant by administrative intelligence or the unifying intelligence.
That's the logos.
Conciliatory
that is the logos. But I'm kind of curious, Nicholas. I mean, to respect the brilliance of your presentations, I appreciate it. But the Sophia part, the Sophia Hebraic feminine noun, Chokmah feminine noun, Sophia feminine noun.
Right. Yeah.
Keeping it back there before pneuma, lost in translation, neutral. Back up to your presentation. Do you have kind of an overarching, I guess, and this may be unfair, but wisdom or Sophia expression for us about the tree? Because I got so much from this, but I'm wondering if you have after you've gone through this process, you got to, oh, I hadn't thought about that kind of thing.
It's not clear to me exactly what you're asking, so I don't know.
I mean, after you've gone through pardon Samantha, but after you've gone through this process, through it, did you have some, I hesitate to use the word epiphany, but have you had some kind of, oh, I didn't get that before, kind of realization while you're putting together your presentation, just from the process?
Well, not right off the top of my head, but I've been formulating this idea probably for years. So I mean, I'm happy for it to finally culminate in a presentation that I was able to give. But I sat down and did it in about 6 hours, and it just kind of all flew onto PowerPoints.
Well, no, that's fair.
I mean, the whole
That's
thing
totally
is kind
fair.
of a process like that.
That's
I mean,
totally
it's
fair.
It's a constant discovery and rediscovery of things, and it kind of feels like a living process. Like every time I approach it or reapproach it, that something new comes out of it. So I can't point to any one thing.
Which demonstrates that the tarot is a living thing, and it's not.
Right.
It's not a dead thing. It's not logos. In other words, we've been able to show that people address the archetypes in different ways around the world. Okay, and the variety of ways is reflected in this book, big book that Jordan is in, but they by no means encapsulate everything. And we're entering a new stage of consciousness, which is represented by this deck, the fifth tarot deck. Okay, and so it's represented by that, but this is only the beginning of that fact. It's not the end of it. Okay. And so my prediction is that 20 years from now, every tarot deck that's newly made will have 5 suits, not 4, at least.
At least. And,
Well, we
I
have this prophecy on record too.
What did you,
So
what did you
we have,
say?
we have this prophecy on record in 20
That's
years.
right.
I'm going to look back to this and
actually
say,
times
Skip Conover knew.
times 2
Oh,
videos.
great.
So
Grand-
Skip, I have to say, I mean, I'm honored at this is the second of 2 Oscars for my deck to be included in that lineage level tome of the Library of Esoterica. But I have to say, when I got it as a surprise, my publisher never let me know that I was included. So it just showed up one day. And then I went, oh, I guess I'm included. I got an author's supporter's copy. Okay, contributor's copy. But I decided to sit down and I'm not going rampant to find where are my cards, and toss it off to the side. I just opened the first page and I read the first article and I just started experiencing the book because I felt like, wow, I just got an opportunity to immerse in 570 plus years of lineage. And Nick, you might have just added a couple of the things you said earlier, but nonetheless, I got to my cards and I just stopped. And it wasn't that they were familiar. It was just one of those, hey, how you doing? Like they graduated from me. So I have to say that this 2.5 inch, 4 or 5 pound book, it was such an honor just to be able to go slow to go faster. It was full on tortoise in the hare. I mean, the hare has a pachinko ball and just never gets anything other than fantasy. And the tortoise is just experiencing every step. And as soon as I opened it up, and I have to say, their sticker on the cellophane was quality.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a quality book. And by the way, I don't know if you know, but the second volume of this Library of Esoterica is going to be published about Christmas time.
Right.
You can pre-order it, and its topic is astrology.
Yes.
Oh, cool.
And they are, Jessica Hundley is just, I have to say, kicking rum. I mean,
Yeah.
she's putting together. Tashin has a habit of being too pretty for its own good. It makes coffee table books look like they should go, try to reinvent themselves. You have to be careful.
Tashin down.
Well, no, you have to be careful because they can over glorify and make something prettier than the substance that it is. But this series with Jessica Hundley, she just doesn't cotton to not substance. So I appreciate that you mentioned that, Skip.
Okay,
so let me ask really quick. Does anybody, Raquel, Patricia, Liza, Nicole, Susie, anybody that I haven't heard from, have any questions? And if you don't, that's completely fine.
Or further comments, because
anything at all.
This is the one thing that I said about Jordan. I love having him here, but we have to control his enthusiasm. We have to.
I think we should start to just mute me from the beginning and open me up only on command.
Jordan is loquacious.
He is
And that's
loquacious.
No.
All right, all right,
No,
all
but
right.
but
Susie.
the idea is
Let's
for
stop
everybody
talking
to,
about me. Let's go to other
everybody
people.
have an opportunity to talk, please.
Yeah,
Okay?
let's
I
hear
don't
from
know.
Susie.
Thank you. I thought maybe we would touch base later on.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
I said I don't have any questions. I just wanted to thank you. But I wanted to touch base with you later on.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining, and I hope
Yeah,
it was
thank you so
of some
much.
use to you.
I'll be here again, hopefully.
Yeah.
Great.
Nicole is in Australia, so
Hey, oh, what's I loved what you said at the beginning. What am I really in service to? Like, I started really embodying that and trying to work out that alongside of really not feeling like I know enough, but listening to you talk about the Kabbalah, and that the way that all those distinction points match up, but in a 3-dimensional or like 4-dimensional way,
Mhm.
transposed over the tarot. But then what came through as part of the conversation was when you're reading the tarot, because this was really densely knowledge-based in the research that you've done. It's obviously relevant, like you know a lot of stuff, right? Whereas I don't know much, but like about that, But I guess I feel like what you can do with the tarot and these symbols and this platform even, like, is go away and take it on, but kind of chunk it down. And then the transcendent function from the Jungian is like, and they talk about it in Gestalt therapy. They say, when you become a Gestalt therapist, the client that comes to you is the client that fits into the knowledge base that you have to impart. And so there's always a sort of completion and a wholeness in the interaction and the dialogue. And it was just really beautiful hearing you speak and thinking about that. And the other thing I got was apart from the layout of the cards, there's this other part to do with what was it? Like, there's so many different aspects of the spiritual aspect of it that I think is really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so big, I can't. Like, I have to listen to this again to get these messages. But it was obviously it was quite deep. But we have to assume that what we're looking at, if we take it off into political realms, like, and start talking about individual things, it's like you have to assume that what you're looking at isn't what you're looking at, and look deeper into these like patterns and what resonates, what comes to the surface, what symbols. And it's funny because just in my own life, I've been really resonating with trees, and there's this sculpture thing going on at the moment here in this town. And there's like all these trees. Everyone's talking about trees. It's really weird. But so it's just, I don't know, I've just got lost. But it's been an interesting conversation. I would like to, there's probably going to be a few things that come to the surface later today, like just thinking about this. And, I think it's, and this fifth element, that's always happening. That's always happening. That's really reassuring that's always happening. That there's always this, like a wheel turning in evolution. And and then everybody else's perspectives. It's been an interesting chat. It's been like, yeah, I really
Excellent.
enjoyed it. So thanks for your work. Thanks for your research and everything. It's been great.
Thank you. Well, I've enjoyed presenting for you guys as much as you seem to have enjoyed listening. So thank you. It's been a pleasure.
How
I'm
about
glad that you seem to
Patricia?
have got something from it.
How about Patricia and Lisa or Liza? Lisa or Liza? Do either of you have comments? And
It's and I don't. I'm
I'm
in this
sorry,
weird.
I'm sorry your name got cut off. How do you pronounce it again?
It's Lisa.
Lisa.
Don't let the
Okay.
Z fool you.
Okay,
Yes.
fine. Okay, so go ahead.
I'm in Sonoma County, California, and right now my power is off because of the red flag warnings, and I was evacuated due to the fires, and the flames kissed my back fence. So I'm in this really weird mental space. So just being here is kind of healing. So I appreciate. I appreciate.
Delighted to hear it.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that, and I'm glad that you at least had some place to take some refuge in.
Well,
Right.
astrologically, it's in my chart. It's what I have to go through, and I'm thinking. I'm imagining it being like the phoenix rising from the ashes. But anyways, enough about me. I want to turn off my mic because but thank you for this time and your talk and allowing me this space.
Thank you, Lisa.
Of course. Yeah, thank you for being with us.
Lisa. Thank you for
Lisa.
Yeah, Lisa, your comment. Thank you.
We'll all be wishing you well.
I have a comment.
Thank
I have a cousin named Lisa, so I'll just remember to pronounce your name like she pronounces it. Raquel, did you have anything else?
No, I have no comments or questions. I really loved the everything that Nick said. It was my first class, I think, about Kabbalah, and for quite some time here in Brazil, I was looking for teachings in Kabbalah in Jewish groups, and I never was accepted. So this is the first like real Kabbalah class that I've watched, and I loved it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
We have higher standards, so only you could come here.
Yep.
So, Samantha, you got to wrap up, or Patricia also?
Oh no, I was just thinking of what Raquel said. Like my grandfather's Polish, he's actually dead, but my mom's, God bless.
So he's not Polish. So he's not Polish anymore.
Not Polish anymore. Reincarnated to the next disaster. No, but
Oh my God. Okay.
Anyway, no.
Wow, that's the worst Polish joke I think I've ever heard.
My grandpa was born in Poland. He passed before I was born, my mom's dad, and changed his name from Wolski to Walsh when he got here to sound more Irish, because that was like considered a better type of white. And all I'm trying to say is, in college, I met a Polish girl. I didn't know anyone who knew about Polish ancestry. She was part of Polish club, and I was like, oh, I would love to go. And she's like, well, only people who are really Polish, So I just
racism within.
I was like, I don't even have time for this. I don't have to educate you, so I just won't go. But that just reminded me of that.
So I have to ask, thank you for that, Samantha. I mean, thank you. Susie, from your perspective here, I mean, I know you're working towards your end of your bachelor and moving into your graduate PhD program. What's your perspective
On what?
just tonight?
Who's right and who's wrong?
Oh,
Oh, well, no, I actually don't do it that way.
I think
Yeah,
Then
don't
that's
answer that.
because I'm
Don't
the one who's wrong because I talk too much. So
no, being at CIIS, it's a very progressive and liberal school, and there's and I guess I don't know if this is the right word, but expansive. So there's a lot of diversity and eclectic conversations. And I'm trying to be diplomatic. I don't think anybody's right or wrong. We all feel how we feel, and I feel that it comes, there's emotional attachments or emotional reactions or responses because of our background.
Yeah.
So it's very multifaceted, and it's interesting that it goes from A to Z, like 0 to 60 in like 2 seconds, and it goes in a different direction. But it's quite interesting. So I'm looking forward to being here again. Unfortunately, Nicholas, I don't know much to have been able to get more in depth, as I'm very, very, very new to it. But I know that I'll probably bombard you all with questions and emails once I do, because it's very complex. So yeah, I love this. It's an interesting, it's part of life more than we actually realize. I think the world is finally becoming more aware of and awakened by what's going on, and maybe that's why the fifth element came into play now, because of all the turmoil and chaos in the world. And I think maybe it was time to, in that heightened climactic state, that we can be introduced to something that seems so radical, but I think that has always existed, like you've mentioned. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And I will say, I think normally, there was the presentation and the conversation piece, and, there was no particular guideline for that. But I think normally we do stay on a slightly more directed narrative. So in following weeks, we should keep to a certain card or a certain path, and hopefully not cover such a broad range of topics. But yeah, certainly bombard me with any questions that you have. That's welcome.
Yeah, the best conversation.
At least for the first 2 hours.
At least
You're right. And I have to say, Nicholas, you're.
I'm
sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I'm just saying the best conversations happen when it's not so formulated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I have to say that just that birth aspect of the conversations. There was off topic, and then there was birth topic. And I think we had a lot of both and more of the birth topic. And I have to say, Nick, kudos for just surfing the groove to sometimes just, crack the whip and dial us back in. And sometimes just go, no, we're going to surf this thing and run it out. So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm cracking the whip here and presenting the next major arcana, which we will be discussing. And by synchronicity, it is the perfect card to be discussing next Monday night.
It sure is.
I'll
Because
take a nap first.
Wow.
Yeah, you'll need rest.
I'll need a lot of rest.
Everybody's got to go visit Mott. Make sure your heart has wings to fly away to wait against the feather. And there you go.
I got superpowers, so.
Susie, did you say that you are in San Francisco?
Those weigh a lot.
No, I'm in actually Portland, Maine. But
okay.
Yeah, I used to live in actually I used to live in many places, but San Francisco was one of them. But I just love that school. So now we're going remote. Now we're remote. But I did visit February. Yeah.
So you're finishing up your bachelor's, and then you're moving to Pacifica after for your graduate. Is that?
It'll be remote. Yes, that's my hope. So I wanted to
Okay.
go to Jungian archetypal studies, and then I was very much interested in the C.G. Jung in Chicago, and studying 2 years additional to there. Yeah, I know that they're encouraging to pursue a PhD, but I think we'll cross that bridge when I get
When you cross it, right?
I mean, I don't think for the C.G. Jung Institute of Chicago, I think that the requirement is just a master's degree to be accepted in. I mean, I can't speak with any authority, but as having a personal interest, I've looked into it as well. And I don't think that it's a PhD as a requirement, although it's probably encouraged.
Yeah.
Oh no, Pacifica encourages that you pursue your master's and then follow on with your PhD.
Oh, I see. Have you
But,
seen the video on this channel Skip had on Becca Tarnas, which I believe her father, Richard Tarnas, is an instructor at Pacifica.
Right.
Yes, actually, I caught that, and then he and I spoke about it today. So
cool.
I have to watch it on several occasions to have that be able to absorb some of that information.
Yeah, they both have great videos on YouTube.
They really do. And
Yeah,
different. I mean, father daughter couldn't be any more different.
Okay, time. So justice, we're going to go for justice next week. And I'm going to call it karma. So we're going to.
Oh, no, you're not going to call it that. Skip. Okay.
We'll talk about that.
We're going to have some discussion next week. Oh, boy.
The universe. It can only be called justice. No.
Okay. No, I'm not going to do that.
Karma is just a spiritual world's crowd control. Oh, boy.
I mean,
here we go, Nicholas. I think I'm going to have to be quiet a lot next week.
So I would like to leave you guys with a quote here, and I think it kind of speaks to what I was hoping. I'd hoped my slide at the beginning of asking yourself what you're in service to would be an antidote to this very thing, and I hope this will kind of pick up on the thread that you were laying down, Nicole. So, man has come to be man's worst enemy. It is a clash between man and God in which man's Luciferian genius has produced the H-bomb, the power to destroy more effectively than any ancient god could. And that's from Carl Jung speaking, page 248. So thank you all for being here. It's been
well,
great
actually,
presenting for you.
Could you read that again, please?
That is spicy.
I don't know that I can.
Luciferian genius. That's the Cliff Notes version. That's all you need to know.
Could you read that again?
Okay. I
Could you
closed
read
my
that
notebook.
again?
So nice.
I mean, you didn't forget how to read, right? I mean, because that was. Sorry, Skip. I'm just going to censor all my words.
Okay. Here we go.
Yeah,
Here we go.
After this, we're terminating the session. So thank you, everyone. And by the way, Raquel, there is a comment to you from Manuela Zalguizuri on the YouTube chat. And she said, "Hi, Raquel, what you said can be related to the term capital cultural from Bordeaux." Now, I'm not exactly following
I wonder if you meant
Manuela's.
cultural capital, maybe.
Yeah, capital cultural. So I'm not exactly sure what she means by that.
I think she's quoting a sociologist, a French sociologist. Yeah, I know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, are we all prepared to let this quote sink in?
Yep.
Let's let it sink in.
Good night, everyone.
Please fish.
We're going to excuse ourselves. I love the room you're in, Nicole. Now it's beautiful. So.
Church. Yeah, it's a rebuilt church of some kind. But
I'm clairvoyant, so I saw that.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Okay, so
let's deepen this quote, Nick.
I'm sorry, Nick is going to give us the benediction, and I will say goodnight to all.
Benediction, nice.
Till next
I'm going to
week.
steep in the benediction.
All right. Man has come to be man's worst enemy. In a clash between man and God, in which man's Luciferian genius has produced the H-bomb, the power to destroy more effectively than any ancient god could.
A woman.
Damn.
Thank you,
That's a
Nick.
I
spicy
hope.
meatball.
All right.